breakaway group of 21, it was always going to include Thomas Voeckler. He didn't make the original move. At first, there was 12 riders up the road. Michael Rogers was part of that group, and then 9 more managed to come across, and Thomas Voeckler was amongst them. One of the things that the BMC team has been doing with their bikes, on the top tube of all their bikes, they've been doing the flags of the national colours of each of the riders on their teams. It's been a nice touch. The bike manufacturers, including Cannondale, they've gone to some efforts to make the bikes more unique at this year's tour. Unique to the individual that's riding them, at least. Return to the breakaway group of 21 riders, 14 teams represented in the break. No threats in the general classification for Vincenzo Nibali, so we can't really see anybody doing the chasing to close it down. Surely the stage victory comes from this breakaway group. Longest stage of the race at 237.5 kilometres, and it's so often the case on the longest day where a breakaway finally does survive. In fact, so far this year, we've only seen 2 breakaways make it all the way through to the finish. That church that we just got a chance to take a look at dates back to having been built between 1856 and 1858. The next climb on today's stage is the Col de Porte d'Aspet, which is one of the most famous or one of the most infamous cols in the Tour de France. And it was there back in 1995 that sadly Fabio Casatelli passed away. And the race will make its way past the memorial to the Italian, who was the winner of the road race at the Olympics in Barcelona, tragically died at the age of just 24. Mikel Irizar is the lead rider in the black colours from Trek Factory Racing. One of the few teams that have missed the breakaway today. They're hoping for big things over the next few days for Frank Schleck to potentially win a stage. It's Peter Stettner in the centre of the picture. Then Marcus Burkhardt, Michael Schär. Alejandro Valverde at yesterday's press conference, he looked pretty relaxed. He said that Vincenzo Nibali has clearly been the strongest, but you just never know. He's also hedging his bets a little bit and not taking too many risks and making sure he holds on to a spot on the podium. And at 34, and with one of his teammates who's not here, arguably one of the very best in the world at Grand Tours, Nairo Quintana, the winner of this year's Tour of Italy. This is very much shaping up as the last opportunity for Alejandro Valverde to get himself a spot on the podium at the Tour de France. Good to see Andre Greipel back in the peloton after what was a tough start to the stage for him. Triple World Time Trial champion Michael Rogers, but not a lot of individual road stage victories to his name. And we saw him at the Giro d'Italia this year when he won his first stage with an attack on a descent down through to the finish. He said 12 years to wait of riding Grand Tours without a stage win. It was too long. I don't want to wait that long again. He didn't. He waited about a week before winning the Queen stage of the Giro d'Italia to the top of the Zoncolan. They start the Col de Porte d'Aspet. It is a Category 2 climb. This climb goes for some 5.4 kilometres, an average grading of just short of 7%. At the end of the day, Vincenzo Nibali is looking to celebrate a 50th of sorts. It will be his 50th time collecting the leader's jersey in a Grand Tour. I'm sure that he will be in that yellow jersey by the end of the stage, unless something disastrous happens. A 4-minute and 37-second buffer to his nearest rival, Alejandro Valverde. Nibali has worn the leader's jersey 16 times at the Giro d'Italia, 7 at the Vuelta, and this will be his 14th if he collects it again today at the Tour de France. Roger Klug, the big German from IM Cycling in the blue colours, getting into the break today. I don't like his chances of surviving at the front of the race all the way through to the finish. I say that with all due respect, but he's just a very big lad to be going up very big mountains. Comes from a strong track cycling background. The blue colours of Jeremy Waugh. It was through the Pyrenees a few years ago where he came desperately close to a stage win. He was in the day-long breakaway. He was off the front. But Thor Hushovd also happened to be in the breakaway and just caught Jeremy Waugh with about 1 kilometre left to race. And the Frenchman was in tears as he went across the line. It was almost as dramatic as Jack Bauer 2 days ago. This is Maxim Maglinski now on the front for Astana. The winner last year of Liège-Bastogne-Liège. The doyen, the oldest of the big one-day classics. And it was won this year by Simon Gerrans, the Australian national champion. Gerrans, no doubt pleased to see 2 of his teammates in the breakaway, Albacini and Kerkelaere. And between those 2, the greatest prospect to be able to get the stage victory would surely be Michael Albacini. Jens Kerkelaere is more a man for the small group sprint finishes, much the ilk of what Simon Gerrans is. Not a real climber, not a real sprinter, not a real time trialist, but good at everything. Greg Van Avermaet sitting at the back of the group. He hasn't been doing much of the pacemaking. Team instructions may well be just conserve as much as possible. So we've got you on hand if need be to support TJ Van Garderen. Well, the French have been having an outstanding Tour de France. Kevin Retzer, number 158 in the move for Europcar. They're putting all their resources today towards Thomas Voeckler. And at the front for Omega Pharma Quickstep, that was Michael Kwiatkowski, who we saw as the leader of the white jersey classification early throughout the race, but slipped away once we got into the Alps. He tried his luck on the stage to La Planche de Belleville through the Vosges Mountains on what was a dramatic day. The day where Alberto Contador crashed out of the Tour, and we saw Tony Martin spend 100 kilometres at the front, setting the pace for Kwiatkowski. Europcar in the green colours with 3 riders in the breakaway today, looking to add to their list of victories for the season. 200 metres to the top, the Col de Porte d'Aspet. It's Michael Rogers who is leading. Tom Jelte Slagter is the man who sits behind him. Who wants the points at the top of this one? 5 points for first place over the top of this Category 2 climb. He's riding with such confidence, Michael Rogers. He looks composed and as if he believes he is firmly amongst the favourites from this group to win the stage. On the stage in the Oyonnax, where it was Tony Galopin who won, Michael Rogers attacked on the descent towards the finish of that stage. Got the group with Galopin and Peter Sagan. Thomas Voeckler wants the points, a former winner of the King of the Mountains classification. He's heading to Bagnères de Luchon. He's home away from home, and he collects 5 in the race for the Polka Dots. Water bottle and a carbo gel across the top for Thomas Voeckler. He knows these roads as well, if not better than anybody else in the race. He's also very familiar with the lens of the camera. Bernhard Eisel looks comfortable. This is Jon Izagirre, the Spanish national champion. He is a very good descender. Former cyclocross champion of Spain. It's not often we speak of the Spanish riders and their descending skills courtesy of racing cyclocross as juniors. But we can certainly do that with Jon Izagirre.
Well, hi, welcome on Radio Tour from race direction car number 2, just behind the pack, going up one of the many climbs of the day. Incident this morning, the crash of Reto Hollenstein, who severely injured his back, but he is back in the pack, and a special guest on this 16th stage, Mr. Mark Cavendish, riding in the car of Davide Bramati behind the breakaway riders. So a lot of big moments to come on this very difficult stage, including the very hard climb up to the Port de Balès. And the main event of the day could be that.
The points across the top of the Col de Porte d'Aspet going to Thomas Voeckler, collecting the 5 for first place. It was then Michael Rogers, followed by Jan Bakelants, and Tom Jelte Slagter picking up just the 1. The lead rider for AG2R Le Mondial, that's Christophe Riblon. The winner of the stage last year to the top of Alpe d'Huez. He was in the breakaway 2 days ago to Risoul. And we even heard from Vincenzo Nibali a few days ago, in fact, when he took his second stage victory, after he went to the top of the climb of the Champs-Rouges. He dedicated the win to Andrei Kovalev, who passed away in a crash in Paris-Nice back in 2003, the year after having finished 4th in the Tour de France. Kovalev was a Kazakh and a close friend of Alexander Vinokurov, who's the team manager of the Astana squad. The white jersey of Romain Bardet. Bardet the brave, I think the French will start to call him soon. He is prepared to take the race on.
I think Jack might just about get back on the descent of this one, though.
Yes, well, he should do. They're a kilometre away from the summit with the main field. The leading group of 21 riders summited quite some time ago. So fingers crossed for Jack Bauer. He'll get back into contact here and survive throughout this day. But I tell you what, he must be concerned about the next 2 days of racing, because they're short mountain stages with a lot of big climbs in them. And I think we'll see some very difficult racing. And a lot of riders may well find themselves taking the quick trip up to Paris, because the race will be decided quite dramatically in the next 3 days of racing. And it's a tough final part of the stage today, Phil, because we've got that massive big climb of the Porte de Balès with a very tricky descent down into Bagnères de Luchon.
We're going to fly into the Spa town. It really is a lovely town. It's been a real bustle this last couple of days, because many of the tourists have been here on bikes and testing out all the climbs in this fantastic area of mountains. But today they're all in Luçon, waiting now for the riders to come in. The breakaway has now almost got up to 10 minutes. Already it's the biggest lead we've ever had in this year's Tour de France, but very soon we might see the figure 10 appear on that.
Yes, but none of these riders are really dangerous in the overall standings or the overall image of the race, because we mentioned a little bit earlier, Michael Kwiatkowski is the best placed rider in this group, and he's 19 minutes behind and starts the day in 16th position. For him, if he was to finish the stage now with a 10-minute advantage, that's him just on the front. If he was to finish the stage with that 10-minute advantage, you'd see himself climbing up inside of the top 10. I think a certain amount of their advantage will get shaved away towards the finish, but there's a lot of riders in this leading group of 21 are thinking about the stage victory this afternoon. Thinking specifically of Vasily Kirienka from Team Sky, who was assisted by his teammate in the breakaway, Bernie Eisel. Jan Bakelants, the rider from Omega Pharma Quickstep, he also will be there to look after Michael Kwiatkowski. The man I think stands the real good chance of winning is the Australian rider Michael Rogers. He'd already pretty much said that this was the sort of stage that he would be looking for after the abandon of his teammate and team leader Alberto Contador. So the main field, as we can see, well, there it is. There's the 10-minute advantage, 10 minute and 15 seconds. We've just moved across into the département of the Haute-Garonne. Started the day in the department of the Aude, moved away from the beautiful medieval city of Carcassonne, which is the host every 14th of July to one of the most magnificent firework displays in the whole of France, before moving into the Ariège, which itself is a beautiful department, and now into the Haute-Garonne.
Well, this is, we've got just on 9.5 minutes since those 21 leaders went over the top, Paul, but these boys have made no outstanding effort whatsoever. They are afraid of the next 2 days.
They certainly are, Phil. I mean, when you look at them, they're nothing really much to write home about. 140-kilometre stage, 170-kilometre stage. But when you look at the profile, that's what makes it quite scary when we look at the next 48 hours of racing, because that's when, if there are going to be any serious challenges to the overall dominance of Vincenzo Nibali, it'll be on the next 2 days.
Well, this is the peloton. A little bit of a flurry of action here as they come up to the top. There's no points available. So the peloton just about hit the top of the climb of the Porte d'Aspet. 10 minutes has passed by since those 21. So we make it 10 minutes 17 at the top of the Porte d'Aspet, Paul. We're looking at about 45 miles to go to the finish. I don't think even with the two obstacles we've got ahead of the field, they can bridge that sort of a gap.
Well, not really, especially when you look at the composition of that leading group. Well, there's one or two riders in that leading group, Phil, of 21 who are not great climbers, but some of them are reputable teammates. Peter Sagan there in the dark green jersey, the leader of the points competition. You could also, if you took away the climbs today, it'd almost be a day off for Peter Sagan. But when you look at guys like Mick Rogers, Tom Jelter-Slagter, they are very good climbers, and they will relish the chance of having a 10-minute start before the end of the last climb of the day.
Well, we're still in the department of the Haute-Garonne here. The lead is now sped away from the top of the Porte d'Aspet, as we're now looking at the Pic de l'Escalette.
Yeah, it's pretty high around here. It's 1,856 meters. And as you can see, way down into the distance, we look right over the department of the Ariège. And behind us is the Pyrenees, and behind us is Spain. The 72, well, just inside 73 kilometers to go. And also one of the wildcard selection teams have got two riders into this breakaway. The riders from Bretagne Sèche Environnement. Anthony Delaplace has got into the breakaway, and Florian Vachon. Both of those riders have been in the breakaway on previous occasions. Just having a look now, Tom Jelter-Slagter, in fact, Team Garmin Sharp said before the start of, well, early on in the race, they said that they wanted to make sure they had a man in the breakaway on today's stage, because I think a lot of teams felt that the breakaway was going to survive on a day like this. The team that's done the best job tactically so far, though, have got to be Team Europcar. That's Kevin Retzer coming forward now in the dark green jersey. A little bit further back is Cyril Gauthier. Right at the back of the group, inside the team cars there, is Thomas Voeckler. The man who, on the last two visits here, has been the first rider to go over the top of the Porte de Balès, and that was in 2010 and 2012, and was also the winner at the bottom of the climb. There he is, ever popular in France, number 159. He's getting up there quite a bit now as well when we start to think about age and experience. He's been around for a very long time, but he is always the guy. He seems to pick specific days to go out and try and do something special on a stage of the Tour de France. Astana have indicated they might be interested to try and gift a victory to who was involved in a very nasty crash on a mundane descent when he clipped a feeding bottle on the descent and went down very hard, lost himself 30 minutes on the stage. For a period of time in the first week of the race, he was up as high as second place in the overall standings, dropped down to remain inside of the top 10, but then with that crash, he's completely slipped away, and now I think has got to take a back seat and do just the normal duties of a domestique, looking after his team leader. Sitting on the back of the group, Team Katusha there, that is Luca Paolini, very much responsible for the victory of his own team sprinter Alexander Kristoff just 2 days ago at the end of the rest day as we charged down into Nîmes. A lot of these riders, though, I think on today's stage will be thinking about just surviving the next 3 days, because for a lot of the climbers it's always difficult, Phil, for a non-climber when you come out of a rest day and try and get back into the rhythm of punishing your body, especially if you don't have that natural ability to climb. The sprinters have a much harder time the day after a rest day getting back into the mountains.
Nibali's team showing him the way down the mountain here, one of only 5 teams with all 9 men on the squad coming off the Col de Porte d'Aspet, as we also will pay tribute here to Fabio Casatelli. Well, they've taken no risks on that way down, Paul. They are clearly showing no concern about the breakaway of 21. Having said that, one man is making good progress at the moment, Michał Kwiatkowski, because with more than 10 minutes now, he's pierced the top 10 overall in the Tour de France.
Yes, that's him there, number 74, just behind his teammate Jan Bakelants. And he could, if we stop the clock right now, Phil, with this 10-minute advantage, we would see him peeping just inside of the top 10. And as we look at the main field, just moving away from the Porte d'Aspet, these guys knew this was going to be a long, hard stage on today's stage. They know there's one more short climb, a climb of 6 kilometers, looming up on the horizon, the Col de Arès. But everybody concerned about this Porte de Balès, which, although it's categorized at 11.5 kilometers, it's an awful lot longer than that, because you've got almost a 5-kilometer false flat along the valley leading up to it, which I personally, being a non-climber, would categorize as part of the climb itself.
Just having a chat down there as the race leader, Vincenzo Nibali. He's talking with Michele Scarponi, one of his strong teammates in Astana. Although having said that, the whole team is strong in this year's Tour de France. They really have proved that to us. And Nibali has always been able to finish off at last with 3 stage wins so far. Maybe more to come in the 2 days that lie ahead. So unusual to see so many riders out in front. This group originally started 12 riders getting clear 45 kilometers into the day, and a long chase ensued that split the peloton, but then 9 riders did get across, and that included Jean-Cyril Gauthier and Thomas Voeckler, 2 riders on the Europcar team, as well as a handful of others. So 9 got on, so we've got 21 in the front. Looks to me, Paul, as though they're going to ride to the big climb as a group too.
Well, there's no question about who these people at the side of the road support. Allez Thomas, that is for Thomas Voeckler. I think you're right, Phil. I would expect nothing happening in the leading group of 21 until we start to get to the early slopes of the Porte de Balès. In fact, 14 teams have managed to get representation in that leading breakaway. The teams to miss out are mainly Katusha, Astana, Cannondale, Belkin, Giant and Trek, and that's not really a surprise because Astana, I think, would look at the way the breakaway formed, saw that it wasn't dangerous at all, and they're thinking about tomorrow and the next day. You know, to win the Tour de France, you really have to be very careful in how much work you do on specific days, and you've got to really come out on the days which are important. I think tomorrow and the next day are going to be very important.
Well, all the hay being taken in under these warm conditions and being used to support the Tour de France. The 101st event, as we remarked on just there, 10:52. They've taken another 2 seconds. They're still gaining, you see, and we've gone inside 65 kilometers to go. A little bit of a split in the road, but won't cause concern to the peloton. Scenario. It only happens usually on one day in any Tour de France when all the balls fall into the same hole together. But there are 22 teams in the Tour de France. One of those teams, of course, is looking after the race leader. There are 14 of those 22 teams in this breakaway.
Yeah, and those are the teams that are looking for the stage victories. A couple of teams have got riders up there thinking about having people a little bit later on in the race. Greg van Avermaet has got up there to look after TJ Van Garderen's interests. The riders have left pretty much of their profile behind them as we get a look at seeing that most of the climbs have been done. It's the big climb towards the end of the day, though, Phil, that's going to have the major effect, I think, on the overall result.
So the peloton just started in the Col des Arts, 11.5 minutes almost since the leaders started this climb. As they make their way to the top, it's about just under 4 miles, the stats on the Col des Arts, by the way, and it's only third category. It takes them to 38 miles still to ride. We only go up to 2,600 feet. The length is 3.7 miles. I was just thinking, Paul, you know, we've had 15 stage winners and we have yet to have a native English speaker win a stage. So maybe today it will be Michael Rogers.
Well, maybe that will be the one that Michael Rogers is looking for, but it's quite rare for that to happen in this day and age. It was certainly not rare in my time because there were not very many English-speaking riders around it. When I rode my first Tour de France, it was only Barry Hoban from Great Britain, myself and Sean Kelly, who were English speakers. But since then, it's been rare to go into such a period of time in the Tour de France and not have an English-speaking winner. So fingers crossed for Mick Rogers today.
As we see 1 kilometre to the summit of this cap, the next one is the highest climb, an HC category. I think I did say there were double points here, but in fact they're only on the finishing climbs. I'm checking the rules as we speak. So the next 2 days they will be doubled at the finish line, but not on this one out on the course, the Porte de Balès. So won't be quite so many points at stake for Tommy Voeckler.
I wonder what Samy Demoulin is thinking about there, the rider with the yellow helmet on. He's regarded pretty much as a sprinter. In fact, a couple of years ago he won a stage into Nantes, which is pretty much right on the entrance of the Loire into the Atlantic. So as far as he's concerned, I don't think he will be able to drag his body over this next climb of the day, because it really is. We're starting to get into some serious climbing with gradients approaching 10.5% at some point on this very long climb of the Porte de Balès.
Moving on the front, Albacini, the Swiss rider who is on the Orica Green Edge team. We were telling you the story about the other day about the Orica Green Edge team bus, which crashed on the opening stage and wedged itself under the finish banner almost causing the finish to be totally disruptive of the Tour de France. Well, I hope nobody's listening from Orica Green Edge, but today the bus crashed again. It knocked down a traffic sign when it was parking at the start in Carcassonne.
Well, Phil, you know me, I always like to turn things into a positive, and after the crash that Orica Green Edge had with their bus, they went on to have a very successful stage victory for Simon Gerrans, won the team time trial, wore the yellow jersey. So maybe for somebody like Michael Albacini in the breakaway today,
I wonder.
It could be good luck for them.
We'll watch out for that. They've got 2 men in the breakaway, but the most obvious one, I think, to succeed would be Albacini. This is a good course for him today. He's a good fast descender as well. And I think that's going to be almost as important today as climbing, because it is a terrific descent over the top of the Porte de Balès on the way down to the bottom. We top out about 21.5 kilometers from the finish, and it's all downhill into Luçon. Takes us up to 1,755 meters, and the sun is shining up there as well today. It's where we're commentating from. We can actually look out across the mountain above Luçon, which is Super Bagnères, and it's crisp and clear. And I'm rather hoping we get to see the vultures here, which they released some years ago. Have been a huge success story. We actually counted 14 of them flying high above our hotel here in Luçon yesterday.
Well, hopefully they won't be flying over the back end of the main field waiting for riders to drop off, because if anybody does drop off, they may well be looking for a little bit of carrion at the side of the road.
Just coming away from the climb of the Col des Arts, which will take us down to the valley. Once we get into the valley, it's not part of the actual climb of the Porte de Balès, but it starts to go up at that very point all the way up to the top. Now, problem here, this is Movistar here having trouble at the moment.
That's Rodriguez. Well, looks like Rodriguez to me. In fact, it's Herrada is the rider at the back.
He's riding away, yeah.
And that was Rodriguez riding away first.
Yeah.
Rojas, I mean, sorry.
Rojas, yeah. Well, they shouldn't have any problem getting back on at the moment. There's no big racing being done, because the next 2 days in the Pyrenees could well decide the final winner of this year's Tour de France. We do have the time trial on penultimate day. If they close down the gaps, that long time trial could be the final shake of the dice before we go up to Paris. 11:25 is the gap, and this is life at the rear of the race at the moment. Jose Joaquin Rojas going back into the pack. Whoa, steady on, boys. I need to get through. I'm in a hurry.
Just taking his few risks there to get up through the convoy of cars. He wants to get himself onto the back end of the main field before they start the descent. So this is the back with the leading group of riders. That gap now, Phil, is really starting to stretch out quite a bit at almost 11.5 minutes. So they're just moving through the little town of Antichamps-des-Frontignes as they move into Frontignes County, the edge of a very large forest here on the western slopes of the Gare Peak. In fact, bears were reintroduced into this area back in 1996. So we talked about the vultures that were released into this part of the Pyrenees. Well, also the Pyrenean bear was also reintroduced into this forest as well. There's a chance to see the beauty of this climb, the Col des Arts, before we line up for the Balès.
Not exactly very wide in the centre of Luçon, so they don't want a whole pack coming in anyway, but that is very unlikely to happen. We are going to witness a terrific battle on the climb coming up, the Porte de Balès. It's a climb of 11.7 kilometres. It's an average of 7.7%, but it often goes over 10%. It is a real tough climb with quite a tricky descent too, back into the Spa Tunnel, or into the Spa Tunnel. We come through here in a couple of days' time again as we race through Luçon. There's a feeding station planned for Luçon on that occasion. By the way, Luçon is twinned with Harrogate, and the mayor of Luçon went to watch the start of the finish of the first stage of the Tour de France in Harrogate, and there are dignitaries here, I believe, from Harrogate to watch the racing today. 12:37, that's about the biggest we've seen, Paul, ever since the Tour de France began. Salachon is where we are right now. Is there anything known other than grass fields about this place?
Oh, it's an excellent place for hay if you want to come down into this part of the world. But Salachon is just a small village. It's got a little chapel in there as well. which goes by the name of Saint-Julien. But there's around about 7 or 8 kilometers, Phil, between the leading group of 21 and the main field. That's a big gap physically.
Well, officially, we've just started it now. 11.7 kilometers to the top. There is the board, and there it says 11.7 to go, and quite a narrow road. And imagine this on the way down afterwards. It makes for a very dangerous return into Luchon to the finish.
Right, it's Bernie Eisel on the front now for Team Sky. Behind him, it's Kevin Retzer, Jeremy Watt in the dark blue FDJ, not too far behind. Watch out for Michael Rogers there. Rogers, probably the oldest rider in the breakaway, but he's been in situations like this, and he used a stage with a very similar profile to this to get himself a victory in the Giro d'Italia in the month of May.
Well, we're down about as much in the valley as we can be at the moment before we start the climb out. We're looking at the main group here, and already the riders are beginning to be shed, because this is Roger Kluge. Now, he is a big man and a sprinter, and this is not for his body weight to climb this mountain today.
Yes, and this is just a little bit further back down the road, because this is the damage that's happening now as we actually start the main field. That's Christophe there, number 23, winner of 2 stages of the Tour de France, but obviously he's not too happy with the incline. A lot of the sprinters now, you have to bear in mind that many of the sprinters are carrying, if you like, if you call it in horse racing, the sprinters can very often carry a handicap of 10 kilos over the climbers.
Absolutely. Some of these climbers weigh in at around about 45 kilo, and these big sprinters are tickling 85 kilo.
Yeah,
that's a big difference.
Well, talking about big sprinters, there is one there, champion of Germany, Andre Greipel, 157th overall. You get an idea of how much time some of these riders have lost, because Andre Greipel there, 3.5 minutes down in the overall standings.
And he's gone off the back of the peloton right at the beginning. His object now will be just to ride home. 11 minutes 46. The gap slowly coming down. We had a high of 12.5 minutes. But there's no chase coming from the field yet. They will look to attack each other, and in particular for some of the riders to attack the race leader, Vincenzo Nibali. Alejandro Valverde is second. Romain Bardet and Thibaut Pinot, the 2 Frenchmen, locked in 3rd and 4th. They're separated by just 16 seconds. So they're going to go head-to-head on this climb as well.
People always talk about the difference between the Alps and the Pyrenees. Well, normally in the Pyrenees, the gradients are just a little bit easier, a little bit slighter than they are in the Pyrenees. And the road surfaces, though, Phil, are much rougher in the Pyrenees as well. And I've never really quite figured out why that is. The roads are narrow in the Pyrenees, and the road surface is always a very gravelly surface, which actually makes it much harder to ride over.
Well, there's the big pack. You see there's only one car behind the red car. That's a neutral service, because that means that a number of riders have now been dropped by the pack, and they're not putting the cars in between. So they cleanly are followers of the Tour de France, because we always find them over the route as we go through. Little support there for Romain Bardet, who sits in 3rd place, and another attack by Jeremy Rowe, and Jerome Pinot back in the main field has had a flat tyre. Well, that is really bad luck.
Well, Jeremy Watt obviously feels that he's got good legs here this afternoon. His 7th participation in the Tour de France, and it's goodbye to Samy Desmoulins. So Bernie Eisel also has done his work in this breakaway. Now we can start to see some serious moves being applied here. Now Jan Bakelant's quite keen. Kevin Retzer also seeing this as a good opportunity. Kevin Retzer, when asked in the early part of this race about what he felt that he was going to be in the sport, whether he's going to be a sprinter or a climber, he says, I've not yet made up my mind so far. And here he's proving that he's got very, very good climbing legs. But as you can see, as soon as we've started those little accelerations, there's a number of riders starting to struggle. Now, that's a bit of a surprise, because Michael Albertini there for Team Orica, he's disappearing from the group. The next man to disappear, Anthony Delaplace of Bretagne, also disappearing. Vasily Kirienko. Now that's a bit of a surprise. And the other rider in there, Florian Vachon in the white jersey, 219 of Bretagne. Sometimes riders get caught by the change in tempo at the start of the climb. They can recover and get themselves back into the race. And it seems that looks just around the corner there, just sitting on the back of that group. It looks very much, in fact, as if that is Thomas Voeckler in difficulty. And it is. Now that's a bit of a surprise because Kevin Retz is doing the tempo. Cyril Gauthier is there, but oh, he's just recovered. I just noticed just getting right onto the back of that group was in fact Thomas Voeckler. That is him, number 159. Cyril Gauthier in front of him. So there's a few riders dropped off there. That's Tom Jelte Slachter over on the right-hand side in the blue and white jersey of Garmin.
Now they're all taking stock after that initial flurry, Paul. We've got Jose Serpa mustachioed in the middle. We've got Michael Rogers, the Australian, on Tinkoff here. Kwiatkowski, a lot to gain, is on the right there in the black. And well, they've had that acceleration, got rid of 3 riders, and now they seem to have slowed back a bit.
Well, one man dropped with the initial change in tempo was Vasily Kirienko, the rider from Team Sky, but he's clawed his way back into this group and now he's gone up to the front to set his own tempo. Now, this can happen very often, Phil, when you've been racing for a long stage, as we have done, and you've been at a constant tempo, then all of a sudden the speed changes and goes up a little bit to the start of the climb. Some riders have a hard time getting themselves into a rhythm. It's almost as if you've got a big diesel engine, and once you get the big diesel engine going, you can start to cruise, and I think that's what happened to Kirienka. And talking about big diesel engines, I noticed Michael Rogers had moved up into 3rd place.
Well, I see that also Michael Albacini is one of the riders, also dropped now from the front group. 6 have lost ground.
Yeah, in fact, and now having started the aggression and the hostilities at the front end of this race, Jeremy Roy of France is now also disappearing. 30 years of age, Jeremy Roy. Turned professional way back in 2003. He's always been a member of the FDJ squad, the Française des Jeux, which is the French national lottery. And just having a quick look here to see who is paying for the accelerations. Thomas Voeckler and Cyril Gauthier are still pretty much there. The long valley now, and this is the Porte de Balès. We're going to wind right the way up to the top of this climb, peaking out at almost 1,800 meters, while further down the climb at 11.5 minutes is the main field. The turquoise jerseys of Team Astana looking after the overall leader, and that of course Vincenzo Nibali. Well, the acceleration and the high tempo of the main field is not really doing a lot of damage to the leading group of riders. What's happening is a lot of riders are actually being eliminated. I was surprised to see Michael Albacini being dropped from that group, when in fact it's his own teammate Kukulair who is quite comfortable sitting towards the front end of it.
You can see the beautiful narrow roads on this climb, a lovely place to go when you're in no hurry to get to the top. The gap has come back a minute more or less now, as we're also seeing in trouble here Tom Jelte Slachter, a winner of the Santos Tour Down Under, and he also, that was a move by Garmin Sharp to try and do something today, but you know, he hasn't been riding that well, Slachter, throughout this tour. We've now lost Eisel, Dumoulin, Slachter, Roy, Retzer, Albacini. Kerkeler's just gone now. The other Orica Green Edge rider, Kluger, and Della Place have also gone down. 10 riders are now off the back, so we've just got 11 men setting the pace.
Well, one man who would be looking for the victory here, I would have to say, is this man Vasily Kirienka. He's won a stage of the Vuelta a España from a breakaway group like this, and he will be quite happy at being able to set the tempo himself personally, because you know, when you're a climber like Kirienka, you feel much more comfortable if you can set your own tempo on a climb.
Yeah, he's determined today. He's trying to put matters to rights here. He wants a stage win to marry up with the 2 he got in the Giro d'Italia. He's really made this. From the 21 riders, there's now 6 or 7 men left in, and that is all now. Kirienka's also been dropped. So too Tony Gallipan in that red jersey.
Well, Mick Rogers knows what he wants to do here. He's created the first selection. It's gone from 21 down to 6 riders. We get closer to the top. I'm sure he will try and reduce the numbers in that breakaway group a bit more. The chase in the main field has certainly not had much of an effect on the gap.
Another attack at the front by Tommy Voeckler. Let's remember, he's won the last 2 visits into Luchon, and he's determined to do it again.
Well, the funny thing is, Phil, he was also the last rider to go over the top in 2010 and 2012 2012 when he went on to win the stage. Now he knows that if he can get over the top of this climb with a 30 or 40 second advantage, they'll never see him again. Now let me throw a little bit of history in as well, Phil, because if he could win the stage here for the 3rd time, he would be the first rider to do that since 1961 to win a stage in the same stage town 3 times, and that would go back to one of your very big
Charlie
favorites.
Gall.
Correct. I'm amazed that you knew that.
The Angel of the Mountains, as we called him. Well, we didn't call him, the world called him that. Now he's pulling his tongue out. That's a bad sign for the rest of the race. As Vukler tries again, that's Jose Serpa, who's come up alongside him. Done the damage again at the back.
Greg van Avermaet from Team BMC slipping away, as too is Kirienka. But just watch how Mick Rogers, Mick is, I have to say, top man here this afternoon. He's the man who's probably got the most experience in a breakaway group like this, and he just allows them to attack and slowly pulls himself back into contention. You know, Mick just is 34 years of age, and he's in the lime green fluorescent jersey. And again, this is Gautier's move.
Well, as we watch these attacks coming here now, and he's got that down to just 4 riders. Look at the clock. I mean, 10:41. They're holding now. Liva Westra here. He's first of the Astana riders to crack. The Dutchman, he's fallen back now. Then now it's up to the yellow jersey very soon. He's still got 2 riders with him.
Well, I'll tell you what, we're getting good value for money here this afternoon, because we've actually got 2 races going on at the same time. We got the race at the front, which was from that 21-man group who have got clear very early on, trying to win the stage here this afternoon. But behind, we've got another race for supremacy in the top positions in the overall standings. And obviously, as Gautier goes again in the back there, Movistar are trying to set up for a last-minute attack, which will come from Alejandro Valverde.
Well, Cyril Gautier did it the other day in the mountains. In the end, he destroyed himself, but he set the moves up, and that's what he's trying to do again. And this time, there'll be no reaction, of course, from Thomas Vukler. There's nothing. It's going to have to be Michael Rogers. Jose Serpa is going to look to drop behind Thomas Vukler. It's up to Rogers now to chase him.
It's about 4 kilometres to the top of the climb. Now, I don't know if you remember during the Giro d'Italia, but Mick Rogers was in a 2-man breakaway on his way to a stage victory, and he was with an Italian rider, Bongiorno, and in fact Bongiorno was taken out by a spectator who got involved, and there was a gap between Mick Rogers and the rest. But I think Mick Rogers would have won the race anyway, as further down the slopes, the French favourite, Sylvain Chavanel, is having a very difficult time because of the speed of the ascent here on the Porte de Balès. So Cyril Gautier, he's now leading. He's 28th overall, so he's obviously a pretty impressive climber, Gautier, as he comes up this climb. But look at Rogers. Rogers not panicking. He's pulling himself back once again. Because he's an older, more experienced rider, he doesn't respond to the immediate attack made by the younger riders. He slowly drags himself up there because he knows his body so much. He knows just, if he's probably just looking at the tachometer there on his revolutions and saying, you know, as if he's driving his car, saying, I don't want to put it up to 6,000 or 7,000 revs a minute. I'll just keep it nice and steady and drag myself slowly up to the attacker and keep himself well inside of that red zone.
Well, Gautier's riding as well as we've ever seen him. He started as a professional in 2007, 6th this year in Paris-Nice. Look at this now, though. There was a big peloton of riders there before, but now they're all just a few heads of state around the yellow jersey. Boy, this is the first big climb of 3 days of high climbing now. This is the Porte de Balès, and it has blown the field apart here.
Yes, well, a lot of pressure going on there. I just noticed a couple of teammates of TJ van Garderen disappearing from the group, and one of them was Armel Moinat. I didn't have time to see who the other one was. But this group now of the yellow jersey of Vincenzo Nibali is a very, very select group. John Gadre is there for Alejandro Valverde. There, number 127 is Thibaut Pinot. Number 81, just in front of him, is Jean-Christophe Perrault. And the white jersey, number 82, Romain Bardet. 141 is Van Garderen, and with him, his best mate and teammate, I would have to say now, is Peter Stettiner.
Rodriguez, who's losing his lead in the King of the Mountains today by a single point at the moment. Micah got 1 point early on, and that might be enough as it's working out with this breakaway just now. Gautier continues to put the pressure on. Rogers wants some help, but he's not going to get it from Tommy Vukler, and I'm not sure whether Serpa can do it either.
Well, a lot of damage in this group, and I don't think it's going to be a great tour this year for Jürgen van den Broek. 131 He was in the top 10. He's dropped down to 11th before the start of today's stage, and tonight I think he'll be dropping down even further. Now Mickey Rogers is back.
Well, he's done all the work too, and look at the way he's set his jaw here, the man from Canberra. It's a bit chilly there at this time of the year in Canberra, but he's roasting on the mountain today. As he looks over, sees what's damage he's done there. Jurgen van der Broek here, he's been very disappointing, and he was the first man to tell the Belgian journalist that the other day. He says, my legs just aren't going to go well in the Pyrenees. And it looks like he's absolutely right. It's still Benoit Intousti setting the pace here at the front for Movistar. As we go down the line, we should see the face, and there it is, of Valverde.
But Pierre Rolland, the rider just dark green jersey, who starts the day well up in 10th place overall, is having a spot of bother.
Yeah, but still got Laurens Tendam is still here, so too is the white jersey, and Thibaut Pinot is also here. Romain Bardet is here. Pierre Rolland, well, he's a big find, and he's gone off the back with a right-hand man here of Vincenzo Nibali. Fuglsang also, job done for him today, I think.
Well, let's not forget, Phil, he's pretty much banged up there. Frank Schleck is also disappearing, the rider in front in the red, white and blue jersey. He's champion of Luxembourg. He'd ridden very well, and it's always, I've always said it, Phil, the day after a rest day can be very, very strange to a rider's body. Your body reacts differently to the ceasing of punishing it for days on end. And all of a sudden you come straight into a big mountain stage. And the battle's on here from Movistar.
Taus tucked in behind Vauclin now as they force Jose Serpa to set the place. 23.9 kilometers to go. We top out with 21.5 to go. We are closing in on the summit, and then hold on to your seat because we're going to go downhill very, very quickly.
Yep, put your seatbelt on, strap yourself in for a very rapid descent downhill with speeds approaching 60 miles an hour going downhill, further down the slopes, inside of 10 minutes now, and it is still the big day, the big attack, the big offensive coming from Team Movistar.
Now this is Gunther van
riders
Garderen here, Paul, and it looks to me as though he's having trouble. He's hanging on to the back wheel of the white jersey of Romain Bardet, just trying to keep him inside. They're 5 kilometers from the summit, a very select group, but Van Garderen under a little bit of pressure there, I think.
Yep, also further down the slopes, 151, Pierre Rolland, one of the big French hopes for a high finish in the overall standings. He is slipping away with Frank Schleck. They're about half a minute now behind the yellow jersey group.
Yeah, South African flag being waved on the left. No South Africans in the race here. This is Cyril Gauthier. He's held them in his sight. He hasn't cracked completely, you know, and on the descent he could be back there because they are looking for the summit now. They're about 1.5 kilometers to climb.
Well, the thing is, Phil, on a descent like this, if you're a real good descender, if you're a bit of a madman, you can pull back 30 seconds going downhill. But if you go over the top with a 30 seconds advantage and you're a good descender, you'll never get seen again.
This is Astana shedding the workhorses one by one now. This is Tanel Kangert who's going off the back here now. And that's going to leave the yellow jersey soon to look after himself and have to answer the attacks all by himself.
Now this is what they will want to do, Phil, over there. Oh, they're just pulling off there, the rider from Movistar whose job had been done. It's now left down to number 13. Lucky for some, and that, of course, is John Gadry. Slipping away is Intousti.
After you make those efforts, that's what happens. We saw it happen the other day with Tony Martin. This is poor TJ Van Garderen on the first monster of the Pyrenees here, and it is cracking him, and he's still 4 kilometers to go. Bauke Mollema has also gone. He's best placed of the team, but every day we see Laurens Tendam get closer to him overall. There's a move at the front now, Thibaut Pinot, and this young Frenchman is trying to stretch the rest of the race. Is there a reaction? Yes, there is.
It's coming first of all from Nibali, then Valverde, then Perrault, and Bardet, who is third overall at the start of the day, is struggling, the white jersey.
This is the man who will fight here, but if this man in blue gets 16 seconds over that man in white, then the man in blue becomes the man in white.
Well, Pinot in that blue jersey at the front, he pretty much announced what he was going to do, Phil. He said, I'm scared about this descent. I want some advantage. I want a little bit of a lead going over the top, and that's exactly what he's done. But he hasn't put distance between himself and the yellow jersey, but he's putting distance between himself and the man who leads the best young rider competition at the start of the day, Romain Bardet.
I haven't seen the 1 kilometer to go, but the leaders must be very, very close to it now. We were looking at the back of the chase there. Kirienka here. and just been passed by Gautier, and Gautier trying to make sure he doesn't get onto his back wheel, but Kirienka's showing some defiance here. He's trying to hold him. He's very close to the summit. Look at the crowd now as they head up towards the top, and also note the wind that's blowing up here, because now we're at 5,700 feet.
Yes, wouldn't be surprised, Phil, to see a little acceleration coming from Thomas Voeckler. He's looking for the gap there. He will want to get himself a few points. But look at the flags at the side of the road. It's getting very blustery. The wind is really ripping up here at the top of the first big high spot of the Pyrenees. And Mick Rogers is still very much in control.
Kirienka tries to control Gautier just at the moment here, as bet your life that Voeckler will want the maximum number of points on this climb, because he could still win the King of the Mountains like he did a couple of years ago right here in the Pyrenees. Well, they've calmed it down a little bit there. Jean-Christophe Perrault is the rider who's also come up behind Nibali, and Romain Bardet now just wants this climb to end.
It is so funny the way different riders can ride differently in the two mountain ranges, the Alps and the Pyrenees. The climbs are very, very different. These climbs are much narrower, much harder, and the surface is a lot rougher, and I think sometimes they are much more easier. They're easier for a tough guy like Mick Rogers to survive over. He's quite happy to set the tempo here, but, you know, he will be challenged on this descent. If Thomas Voeckler goes over the top of this climb with his leading group of three, you better put your straps on, Phil, for the descent, because he will go ballistic.
He's got to beat Michael Rogers on the descent, because Rogers will beat him in the sprint for sure. Serpa isn't the sprinter. These three are going over the top together. Nobody's going to get away here. Voeckler will want maximum points if he can get through the crowd here.
Yes, that's what he's looking for. He's actually today moved up into 5th place in the overall standings in that King of the Mountains competition, while further down the slope, Bauke Mollema, number 61, and Romain Bardet, they're losing a couple of huge chunks.
Now, Voeckler wants a way through here. He's on the inside of Serpa, who's taking him on here. Serpa only just lost the previous climb, and he's going to win this one. He's gone clear, so it's Serpa who gets the points. Voeckler will be very annoyed about that. He almost fell off. He gets second, and Michael Rogers third.
Well, that's the very erratic pedaling style of Thomas Voeckler there, but this is 4th and 5th on the road. Vasily Kirienka has not given up, and he's got with him Cyril Gautier, who's really pulled himself inside out to stay in contact on this climb. Over the top, you can see the flags rippling, indicating the wind is very, very blustery over the top of this climb. Just about 6,000 feet, sorry, 2,000 meters. It's very rarefied, the air, as we get up here, 1,700. So, a bit further down the slopes now as we start to get up to the top of the climb. This is Pinot, who knows today he could climb a little bit higher up and get himself the best young rider competition. Alejandro Valverde is in third. Nibali on his own this afternoon. He's going to be very careful now, because he would not want to have a mechanical incident with no teammates up alongside to support him.
The rider who sits third overall in the Tour de France at the start of the day, Romain Bardet, is conceding that position at the moment to another Frenchman. Thibaut Pinot is moving into the podium place in Paris, and he's going to fight very hard on the way down.
This is Michael Albacini on the left-hand side, Orica Green away, but it's obviously the big attack coming from Thibaut Pinot. Like I said, he's got a teammate up there alongside him. Perrault is in that group, and he starts the day in 6th place. We're going to have a serious sorting out. Now, Jose Serpa went over the top of that climb in 1st place and lit the igniters for his jets, and he's speeding down the descent now as we move into the Département of the Haute-Garonne. 124 there is Arnaud Jonazon. He's a very good climber. He's ridden well in the Tour de France in the past, but now he's sacrificing himself for his teammate.
Well, over the top, the order was Serpa, Voeckler, Michael Rogers, Kirienka. We're now on the way down here. Speeds easily attainable of 60 miles an hour as the riders now try to regroup in that breakaway. They've gone over the top, still with an advantage of 9 minutes. And it reminds me of 2 years ago when the yellow jersey finished 7 minutes behind the day's winner. That was Tommy Vauclair.
Well, as we said, Phil, there are two battles going on here today. One is to win the first Pyrenean mountain stage. The other is for the white jersey right now, because it looks very much as if it's slipping away from the shoulders of Romain Bardet. Here he is, wears number 82, and it's going right across the shoulders of Thibaut Pinot. Well, the French wanted a duel. It looks like they've got one.
Yes, and this young man really is in a very, very bad state at the moment. Romain Bardet, as the leaders are now on the way down the mountain as they try to close it all up. The blue jersey of Pinot is... we are hearing on radio that Peter Stettner has got up alongside TJ Van Garderen, which means that maybe they can help on the descent here, as Arnaud Jonassen is the rider trying to help. And at the moment it's Jurgen van den Broek who's also coming up now to join 141 TJ Van Garderen. Like the third place overall, TJ is losing ground here and is 5th place in the race.
Well, let's not forget this is the first day of 3 in the Pyrenees, and there's a lot more racing to come, and tomorrow the stage is going to be even more violent than this, because it's a short stage with a lot of repetitive climbs, one after the other, as Jonassen does an incredible job here on the front for his teammate Thibaut Pinot, who is eyeing the lead in the Best Young Rider competition tonight, and he's tickling a 3rd place in the overall standings, which he'll rip away from the 23-year-old Frenchman Romain Bardet.
Well, if he gets anything like a lead over the top, then they'll descend very, very quickly to try and get into that lead. That's the rider's still got a long way to go here on the climb too, which is not good news for this man. The longer the climb is going on, this rider is a little bit in distress just now. He's a youngster and a star of the future, and a possible winner of the future, but right now he's under extreme pressure.
Well, Phil, you remember what I said a little earlier, as we see Jurgen van den Broek here riding away from TJ Van Garderen about AG2R, trying to ride for too many goals. Well, one rider in AG2R, Jean-Christophe Perrault, he dreams at 37 years of age of a podium position. His teammate is ahead of him in the overall standings, and he isn't even thinking about helping his teammate. He's riding his own race here this afternoon. Which pretty much means at the end of the day, AG2R could be throwing away the Best Young Rider competition and handing it over to Thibaut Pinot, while Jean-Christophe Perrault, he's thinking about a crack at a podium. And at 37 years of age, this may well be his last opportunity to get onto the podium of the Tour de France. And he's quite realistic about it, Perrault. He said very much before the start of the Tour, look, I'm not going to win the Tour de France. I'm too old. I've got the best part of my career behind me. But my dream before I retire is a podium finish in Paris.
And why not this year? Because if all goes according to plan, he could be in 4th place tonight in the Tour de France, and then challenging probably the new 3rd place rider, Thibaut Pinot. All depends on how fast they go down this descent to the finish.
Let's not forget that Perrault, Phil, is a very good individual time trialist, and there's a long time trial to come before we finish in Paris.
Johnson, absolutely superb work. His job here is to give 110% and then just get out of the way and allow the other rider in blue there, Pinot, to finish it off and claim the white jersey, and probably 3rd overall in the Tour de France tonight. But Alejandro Valverde has done nothing here. He hasn't put any attack in. He hasn't tried to hit Nibali. He's just sat in this group. He's 3rd wheel at the moment.
Yes, but just wait and see what his action's going to be like on the descent. It's amazing to see the improvement of Thibaut Pinot in 2nd position there from last year. Bear in mind, he's 24 years of age. He gives Romain Bardet 12 months. Bardet has still got a lot to learn about himself, and at 23 years of age, he's still got a lot of improvement to come in his body before he becomes a serious challenger. Look at Pinot there, accelerating up towards the top, followed immediately there by Valverde and the yellow jersey.
Huge effort now. You saw Johnson drop away. His job done for the day and done extremely well. Valverde very alert. He moved immediately on that back wheel of Pinot, and Nibali untroubled following. Bit of aggravation at the front here between the 3 leaders. They're all arguing now, but nobody's setting the pace. 1 kilometre still to climb here for Romain Bardet, who seems to be losing his 3rd place in the Tour de France tonight, and the white jersey.
That's a big chunk of time. He's about 1.5 minutes behind the yellow jersey group. But, you know, the days can change quite dramatically in the Tour de France, and now all of a sudden Valverde has disappeared because of the attempt here by this man, Pinot. Now Pinot is looking at climbing right up in the overall standings tonight. He was only about 29 seconds behind Alejandro Valverde at the start of the day.
29 seconds, absolutely right here, and he's seeing second place in his eyes right now, this man in blue. This is the man who walked away from the Tour in tears once because he couldn't descend. He was scared. How much has he improved this year? And now Valverde, who seemed to be marshalling all the affairs. We missed the catch with our television. We're not in control of where the pictures go. And Valverde unshipped there. Meanwhile, further down the mountain, Belgian hope Jurgen van den Broek riding alone. Look at this now, only yellow versus blue, I think. No, there's three. Christophe is still there, Perrault.
Be better. Be better than one guy. Be better than five guys, twice your size. Be better out here.
This move coming next.
We switched away, but it looked to me like he was building for an attack there as he was taking the most of it. We've gone back to see Romain Bardet on the way down the mountain now. He needs a terrific descent today.
Well, you see why the riders were concerned about this descent. You see how narrow this road is. There are no safety measures towards the side. If you get one of these corners wrong, you are straight on into the sheep field.
The leaders now just inside 9 kilometers to go. Kirienka didn't attack. He's gone to the front though, as we're now moving to the back with Jose Serpa. He's the least likely to on the way down. TJ Van Garderen, the American who was in 5th place overall, has just summited about 15 seconds ago at the top of the climb. And so he's in danger tonight of losing his 5th place to Jean-Christophe Perrault.
Well, in the leading group, they need to watch out for Serpa. Serpa has got a very good sprint finisher, but more important is all of a sudden the yellow jersey, Vincenzo Nibali, has felt a little bit of pressure coming from Team Movistar. But he doesn't need to panic. He's actually the man who's in control of this race, Phil. He starts with a comfortable advantage over Valverde, 4:37. Looks like number 11,
That's
Alejandro Valverde.
He's
a good descender. He will try and take advantage of the technical part, but all of a sudden they're pulling themselves back to him. That's a Pinot in 2nd position, and Nibali just cruises back up. He doesn't want to have a mechanical incident, Phil, at a moment like this, because if he does, he's got to chase on his own. But if Alejandro Valverde has a mechanical, he's got a teammate alongside him. If Thibaut Pinot has a mechanical, he's got a teammate. But look how much of that road they used going round that corner.
Well, I must confess, I'm a little bit surprised that Janson could even get himself back up here because he did so much work down there. Thibaut Pinot is the rider who's the man with the most to gain today, and he's having a terrific day in the Pyrenees. Back to Jeremy Watt, the other rider who's joined up there.
Again, a good advantage, right, Phil, for riders putting a man into the breakaway early on. 21 riders got clear, and a lot of the riders in that breakaway group had interest for team leaders down towards the end of the race. This is a little bit further down the road here, trying to pace this man, Romain. He's pulling back a fraction. That's, well, we're looking here at speeds going down this hill. They will be going up to 60 miles an hour in the straights, slowing down to not more than about 45 miles an hour in the corners.
Bauke Mollema just underneath us there as he now tries to get, that's his team car waiting to fall in as Bauke's trying to get back into this race. He started the day 7th overall. And coming together, the fastest. Come back up to the 5 riders in front here at the moment, and there's a demonstration of descending now coming from the race. 8:35 is the gap. The winner comes from these 4 today.
Yes, we're coming closer and closer now, and there is John Gadret. He's got the upside-down numbers there, just trying to get away the bad luck from number 13. But he did a lot of work a little bit earlier on to try and set something up for his own teammate Alejandro Valverde.
The climbing is over for the first day of 3 in the Pyrenees, but it's all being put on the descent. A totally different skill by these fantastic athletes, and this man's trying to get back into this race in the white.
The man in front of him is his own teammate, Samy Dumoulin, normally a sprinter, normally a man you see on the flatlands, but here, having been in the breakaway early on, he's pulling himself inside out to try and pace his teammate back into the race. But Bardet is currently 1 minute and 40 seconds behind the yellow jersey group.
Well, they're trying now, they're under extreme pressure because Rogers is the rider up front who's trying to ride away on the descent.
He's been chased there by Kirienka in the black and blue, followed by Vogler, followed by Serpa. So he's now launched himself off the front of this group, but he's trying to chase down just around the corner. I think he'll be trying to bridge up to Cyril Gauthier. 5 kilometers to go, and there you can see Mick Rogers is just about to pull himself up to the Europcar rider.
This incredible pursuit of this mountain being enacted at probably 80-90 kilometers an hour. They've just gone under 5 kilometers, and Michael Rogers has got across to Thomas Voeckler as these two are battling it out together.
This is actually Cyril Gauthier. He's the one who made the move on the descent, and Mick Rogers saw that. He saw that Thomas Voeckler was holding back, and he said, right, I'm off. He took the advantage of a couple of tricky little corners and rode himself across to Gauthier. Now, this will bode good for Mick Rogers, because this will stop Thomas Voeckler chasing in the group behind, and that's exactly what's happening. They're leaving all of the pace-making up to Vasily Kirienka in the black and blue jersey there of Sky. But you know what? 4 kilometers to go. Mickey Rogers off.
Rogers has gone around Gauthier and has now applied the pressure again. This is the rider who won 2 stages in the Giro d'Italia. He finished 18th in that race. He's now in this race, and this will be another possible Tinkoff Saxo win in the memory of Alberto Contador, who's out of this race with a broken leg. These are absolute panic. Kirienka's trying to move away now.
Well, this is a massive chase downhill, and at these speeds, Phil, it's not going to take them very much more than about 4 minutes. Coming across very, very quickly is Kirienka. Kirienka is looking at the back wheel of Gauthier. Now, once they catch Gauthier, just watch the move and the temperament of Thomas Voeckler, because all of a sudden he won't hold anything back, and he will try and use a couple of corners to get across to Michael Rogers. The gap we're looking at is not much more than 4 or 5 seconds.
3 kilometers to go now as we run down towards the finish. Everybody's coming back together, but not the man from Australia. He has ridden the Tour de France. This is his 10th time in the Tour de France. On one occasion, way back in 2007, he looked as though he was going to win the Tour, and he crashed out when he was in the lead. That was the end of Michael. On a descent as well, need I mention right now, as Michael Rogers now tries to ride away and ride to victory.
Well, we're looking here at the man who started the day in the yellow jersey, continuing to move away from everybody else. But the man who started in 4th place overall, Thibaut Pinot, in the dark blue, the light blue jersey there, he is looking to climb up into a podium position tonight, because he will leapfrog ahead of Romain Bardet.
He'll be on the podium, and that's what he wanted. We're almost into the streets. We are into the streets of Luchon for the lead now. 2 kilometers to go for the chase here. And set at the back here, and I thought I saw a shake of the head there from Thomas Voeckler. He's come down in solitary splendour here in 2010, 2012. Kirienka has put in a move now. Have they left it too late? Here is Michael Rogers of Canberra, who's now trying to get the victory here after 10 years of trying. This will be his first ever stage win in the Tour de France, but it's no time to remind him about what happened to Jack Bauer from New Zealand just 2 days ago.
Mick Rogers is looking at 1.5 kilometers to go now. He realizes this is extremely important. Now look at this. Thomas Voeckler is just getting onto the back of Kirienka. It's not very much, Phil. That is 4 or 5 seconds, and it's going to be a real chase right down to the line.
We thread our way through the labyrinth of streets in Luchon here. Over 50 years the Tour de France, 50 times the Tour de France has come here. 8:35 the gap to yellow. That's a different battle today. 1 kilometer to go. Michael Rogers checks it out, looks over his shoulder. They're not far behind.
Well, it is not very far at all. It's around about 5 or 6 seconds. And, you know, Mick Rogers' body here is yelling out for a little bit of surrender. But he says, no, I'm pushing you just that bit further. He's got a big, wide gap behind him, but they're coming across very, very quickly. Mick Rogers knows this would add to 2 incredible victories in the Giro d'Italia. Cyril Gauthier is sacrificing himself behind, but I think it's very late. It's too late for the 4 chasers behind Mick Rogers.
Rogers turns into the home straight now. He might just about see the finish, but it's just off a little bend, the finishing line through the S's. Well, there's the Australian flag, and they've chosen the right day to fly that now. 400 meters to go. 10 times he's ridden the Tour de France. He's never won a stage. He's known the sadness of crashing out when likely he'd be the race leader. Michael Rogers is going to do this, and he just acknowledged that fact. He cannot believe it. What a season. He's back to his best. A pro in 2001, 10 tours. He takes a bow. What a curtain call that is. The sprint for second place, 2 teammates. Kirienka very, very determined on the right, and that's going to go to the photo.
But there's no photo for the man. Look at that, just coming in there. That looked like it was Greg van Avermaet who made an incredible comeback from the group of 21, a big survivor for a big sprinter.
Well, they're all going to keep coming in now from that breakaway, and the clock will decide the order of overall tonight. Nobody in this breakaway coming home affects the overall race lead. That race is still to come in yet, and it could be the best part of 7.5 minutes. There's Michael. Well, AG2R have had men up there all day. They should be okay to keep their lead in the team race, but Jean-Christophe Perrault might find himself up to 5th tonight as well. We go back out onto the road. The comparative calmness now, while downtown in Luchon, Michael Rogers celebrates. The maillot jaune of the Tour de France is still preoccupied with the men all around him.
Well, as I said, Phil, we're looking at 2 races here this afternoon. The first race has gone to Michael Rogers. The next question is, where will the next race go? Will Thibaut Pinot be in the lead in the Best Young Rider competition tonight? I think pretty much he will. But what a battle it's been. There's been a real shuffling again, and this is only the first of 3 days in the Pyrenees. There's a lot more racing to come, and Alejandro Valverde here is trying to lay down the foundations for him for a podium finish in Paris.
Number 81 in the back. Let's have a look at the picture. Oh, Vogler got second there. Normally the winner here, but this time second him. Great performance, mind you. Kirienka given the 3rd place there. But just looking at number 81 here, Jean-Christophe Perrault, he might well find himself up to 5th tonight. Kwiatkowski has come across the line in 7th place. This is Slachta coming up now, and Tony Gallopin, I think it is, alongside him.
Well, bienvenue au Tour de France to Bagnères de Luchon. Well, Race Radio is still pretty excited as we see a little split going clear off the front.
Yes, including the yellow jersey has slipped away here. And this is still leaving Thibaut Pinot back here, the blue jersey up front.
But all of a sudden, there we've got Gadret. Thibaut Pinot is in this group, as is Perrault.
Well, I'm just thinking that Valverde must have put a move in there. Our cameras didn't pick that one up, but the yellow jersey is not here, so he must have gone up front. We've gone behind that group now. This is Bardet trying to take matters into his own hand with his teammate Dumoulin.
Well, over the top of the final climb, he was 1 minute and 40 seconds behind the yellow jersey group, so that means that he'd lost his 3rd place in the overall standings to Thibaut Pinot, and that's a great battle for France, which will continue right over the next 3 days, because those 2 riders, although 23 and 24 years of age, are very, very good climbers.
Well, Gadret doesn't like to go down hills. He's just been dropped by the efforts here of Thibaut Pinot. We're now got the chance to go forward. Meanwhile, downtown, they continue to cross the line. This will be Jan Bakelants who's coming in now.
Yeah, Bakelants part of that early breakaway of 21 riders. But, you know, I have to say, Phil, Kwiatkowski coming in 7th place on the stage has made a pretty impressive operation here this afternoon. Vincenzo Nibali, well, not too much of a concern for him. You might just have noticed the nice little design there on his bike of the Shark. Well, the Shark of Messina is looking to bite once again.
Well, it was, in fact, Valverde who tried the descent, but nothing doing as far as the yellow jersey concerned. The top 2 riders in the Tour de France are still together going down to the finish.
Yes, but Valverde wants a bit more time, if he can, over Pinot and also over Jean-Christophe Perrault. He's not thinking about distancing the yellow jersey at the moment. He's thinking about consolidating his 3rd place overall. But look at that, all of a sudden, recovery for the man who couldn't go downhill to save his life last year, and here he is, Thibaut Pinot, riding himself back into this race.
Trying to get back on here is Jeremy Roy. He was in the original breakaway as they go under 4 kilometers to go now. Pinot has got back, so any gains have now been negated by another 5 pieces of descending there. Meanwhile, the remnants of the break are still coming in. Flavien Vachon followed by Retzer. 4 3/4 minutes has gone by since we saw Michael Rogers win alone, but not by very much, down in Luchon, his first ever stage win in the Tour de France.
Well, Val to the day in 3rd place overall. He'll slip away, but he's still in front of TJ Van Garderen on the road. Van Garden's got a couple of teammates up alongside him.
There is Luchon now, as we're almost off this climb. 2 kilometers to go, we will be. Another great day for Vincenzo Nibali. He's watched the minnows, if you like, go for the stage win, while he's just kept an eye on the men that matter. They've tried to hit him and he hasn't blinked an eyelid. He's going down on the wheel of his closest rival right now, Alejandro Valverde.
But one man who's done a great job is the rider there in the white jersey of AG2R, number 81, because Jean-Christophe Pirot, in 6th place overall at the start of the day, Phil, is a very good individual time trialist. And at 37 years of age, he's made no bones about the fact that he's dreaming of a podium finish in Paris.
Well, he only has to get in 11 seconds ahead of TJ Van Garderen. I think he'll have done that, and he climbs up over him in the overall classification. So he'll be 5th tonight. He can't climb out any higher because the other guys, well, possibly, it depends on the gap with Bardet. We could see, well, I think we'll certainly see Pinot move into 3rd tonight. In the Perrault has climbed to 4th.
But bear in mind, Phil, you could take all of these numbers, throw them up in the air and have a completely different race tomorrow, because we're back into the mountains.
Every second counts, Valverde making that plainly obvious here. But, you know, I've never seen Nibali make a single mistake ever since this race began. He goes with the moves, he won't give them a second.
Well, you saw the little tap there onto the rear end of Pinot. His teammate comes up alongside him and says, come on, onto my wheel. I will pace you to the line here. But very quickly to respond, the rider up into 3rd is Valverde. Jean-Christophe Pirot, I have to say, Phil, at 37 years of age, this man has really come across to the road cycling section from mountain biking a couple of years ago to become a great star, while Nibali, he just watches the race unfold in front of him.
But the man taking the pace here, Jeremy Waugh, is just giving everything now to drag every second out of Romain Bardet for number 127. He will take him all the way to the line. Every second puts the white jersey on his shoulders. And this is Leopold Koenig, who's just come out of nowhere.
Yes, and I'm getting information that TJ Van Garderen, the American, has just gone over under the banner, indicating 5 kilometers to go. So he could have lost a good 4 minutes at the end of today's stage, but he has got a couple of teammates up alongside him. He's in a group of about 10 or 12 riders, as Kukulair is up there for Orica Green Edge.
He's just coming back from the original breakaway here, as so too is Jeremy Waugh, who continues to drive this race to the line. Thibaut Pinot in 2nd place, the 2nd man in blue. He's going to be the top Frenchman tonight, and he's loving every moment of his journey to Luchon. There's a white jersey awaiting him, and that's why he's going to even sprint to the line. And look at this, Valverde mixing it. They're gonna, you could throw a blanket over these. If there's no gaps between the wheels, they all get the same time, and they'll all go out tomorrow locked together again.
Yeah, but what about the man just getting on the back there, Phil, Leopold Koenig? He could be seeing himself climb up even higher in the standings at the start of the day, 8th, maybe even 7th tonight.
He's a real story, that kid, for NetApp, as they come over the line. Jeremy Waugh comes over the line. They're all together all the time to be the same. There'll be changes tonight in the overall classification, because Romain Bardet and TJ Van Garderen, both in the top 5, have yet to finish.
Well, this is Roger Kluge in that early breakaway once again from IAM Cycling. He will have enjoyed his race through the mountains. The next 2 riders from Movistar. Movistar, watch out for this team, Phil, over the next few days. On the left-hand side, it's Gadret. The other side is Jon Izagirre, the champion of Spain. I think Movistar are inspired by our proximity to Spain today. Professional cyclist is 3rd of this year to add to 2 stage victories in the Giro d'Italia, stage 11 and stage 20, and the stage 11 win was very similar to that one, getting away on the descent and holding right the way towards the line. And interesting what he said there, that it was either going to crash or win the stage. He got the stage victory ahead of Thomas Voeckler and Vasily Kirienka. Jose Serpa in 4th position, Gauthier 5th. Greg Van Avermaet, great comeback by him on the descent. The Belgian, who is one of the real sprinters for Team BMC, getting 6th place. Kwiatkowski losing 36 seconds, but at the end of the day, he'll find himself moving high up in the overall standings. My quick calculation there, is that Kwiatkowski will be up inside of the top 10. This is the moment when he had a little word with Thomas Voeckler saying, stop messing about with me, mate, because you're not going to beat me today. And he said, no, I'm not going to work because I've got my teammate behind. Well, this is the teammate that he was waiting for, Cyril Gauthier. And once Gauthier got clear, Michael Rogers just used Cyril Gauthier as a launch pad. And once he got the gap, they were never going to see him again.
Nice the way he took that bow, wasn't it, Paul? It's unloaded a lot of pressure off his back there. Finally, after trying for so many years, he gets a stage win in the Tour de France.
Well, I think, yes, Phil, it's a man that we thought could very easily have been a winner of the Tour de France on certain occasions. He was confident coming down there. He was not going to let anybody take that victory away from him. Thomas Voeckler was looking to write a bit of history by being the first rider to win 3 times in the same town finish. But for Mick, I think he was very profound in his interview just by saying that he feels a little bit more relaxed going into situations like this and is prepared to take the risks, and he took that. So, and the other classifications, Peter Sagan, well, there's no change in that competition. He still leads the king of the sprints competition, with Rafael Majka now moving up into first place in the King of the Mountains with a single-point advantage over Rodriguez and Nibali, while Thomas Voeckler climbs up into 4th place in that competition, looking for 61 points. Here is the overall standings then. As you can see, there's confirmation. Pinot up into 3rd place, Perrault into 4th, and Romain Bardet drops down into 5th, as does TJ Van Garderen, drops from 5th to 6th. Leopold Koenig jumps up into 7th place, Tendam into 8th, Kwiatkowski peeps into the top 10 in 9th place, and Bauke Mollema drops down from his overnight place to 10th, having started the day in 7th place overall. But look at the gaps now starting to appear. 4:37 to Valverde, that's exactly the same. Pinot too at 5:06, but up into 3rd place, setting up to be another couple of dramatic days as we look to rearrange the top end of the overall standings. But Thibaut Pinot looked very good on that descent, and for a man last year who couldn't go downhill, he did an excellent job today, while just sitting in the wings, really. Vincenzo Nibali watched it all unfold.
For a spot on the podium in Paris, or a shuffling of the names in contention for the top 3 yesterday. And the brutal climbs of the Pyrenees promised to shake them up again today. It's stage 17 of the Tour de France. Stage 17, starting in Saint-Gaudens, making its way through to Saint-Lary-Pladardais. It is a short stage of 124 kilometres, but you could make a strong argument that this is the Queen stage of the race, the most difficult. 4 climbs throughout the day, 3 of them Category 1, and then an Oars category.
Really is the champion of the Pyrenees his last few years. Beautiful scenery today as we head off through the department of the Haute-Garonne, that's the famous river. Heading in towards Gallier now, as the riders come through here. They're coming through already 11 minutes quicker than the fastest expected time. So they've got off to their usual fast start this year. And the riders all know 124 kilometres is short in professional terms, but of course the obstacles along the way are likely to make this the hardest stage of this year's Tour de France. We're calling it the Queen Stage, which is the title the riders give the toughest day out in any 21-day stage race, and I think this will be the reckoning today. 54 seconds, working hard to gain only seconds just now.
Yeah, but we've only been racing for about 20 minutes as we look here at Andre Greipel. He seems pretty happy. He's got himself over the mountains, although he said the fact that I'm riding well in the mountains in the Tour de France doesn't necessarily mean I want to go to the World Championships in Spain towards the end of the season, because having read about the World Championship course, he thinks it's much more suited to the climbers. But Phil, the average speed of the first 20 minutes of the race is 53.5 kilometers an hour.
Well, they are picking up a slight tailwind, but having said that, look at the length of the peloton here. This peloton is not allowing this breakaway to go. They're just having a problem containing it at those sort of speeds. We're running right up the valley here now. We're actually heading to Spain, and we cross into Spain, and then we come out of Spain down the Col de Portillon, which will bring us back through the Luchon, where we finished yesterday. They've turned the main street now into a big feeding station for the race as it passes through, and then it'll set for the finish in Saint-Henri-sur-Loing.
Well, they've not really got the 1 minute yet. Jens Voigt is a good man to have in a breakaway like this. He's won 2 stages in the Tour de France in the past. I remember that one in Saron. In fact, it was a slightly uphill finish, and Brad McGee was with him on that occasion. He dragged Brad McGee to the finish. Brad McGee held on to finish in 2nd place and then pretty much collapsed after the finish line, saying he felt as if he'd ridden the whole stage behind a motorbike. Well, it was a German motorbike by the name of Jens Voigt.
Nicolas Ede in the red jersey just sat off our camera at the back here. 2nd Tour de France. He finished 128th in 2012. There he is, number 172, but he is a king of the mountains in the Tour of Spain.
The race has just gone past one of these stable radars at the side of the road, and it read 65 kilometers an hour. I don't think there's any parking. There are no speeding tickets for the peloton, are there?
No, well, look, I think we're on a 90 kilometre an hour road. Otherwise, it might have gone up in smoke, that radar gun today, with all these cyclists going by. 1 minute and 3 seconds now. And already we've only got 100 kilometres left to ride. Now, when we go over the top of the Col de Portillon, we've done approximately half distance already, and it's only then that we get into the climbs of the day. Thing about short stages, Paul, the riders attack them.
Yeah, they do, but the only problem is that short stages make a short length of time in the saddle, but very slim elimination times. A lot of the non-climbers will be concerned about this, but there's actually a special elimination percentage today because of the shortness of the speed, and obviously with this high average speed as well. I think we'll see that elimination time creep up to around about half an hour, but you know, half an hour is not much on a stage like today.
Well, Soulard Gauthier in the breakaway. He's the best placed. He's 41 minutes and 54 seconds behind Vincenzo Nibali. And everybody else is more than 1.5 hours behind him. So that's why he's not going to be too interested.
Chance there to see Thibaut Pinot looking pretty comfortable in his new white jersey, which he leads by 1.5 minutes over his compatriot. And I would say that that would be a big battle that will still go on today and tomorrow, and it'll be interesting to find out exactly what happened to Romain Bardet. Maybe just a little bit of youthful enthusiasm. After all, he's only 23 years of age, the Frenchman, who sits in 5th place overall, and I think we'll see a lot more of him over the next few years.
Jens Voigt, look at his arms, absolutely soaked in sweat. This boy knows exactly what he's doing. He's so experienced. 17 tours, his last one this year. He retires at the end of this season. The peloton coming around the roundabout here under the escort of the Russians at the moment, Team Katusha, just to see. And we don't really know how Joaquim Rodriguez is doing, because he has good days and bad days as he recovers from a serious accident. But he's still right in the thick of it, only 1 point off the King of the Mountains jersey. Sprint comes first today, and that's why I was surprised not to see Peter Sagan in the first breakaway of the day, because in 5 kilometres he could take a back seat. He won't be seeing the finishing line with the leaders, but he's so far ahead in the competition. 20 points at this next sprint point doesn't seem to interest him anymore.
No, he's got a massive advantage, 402 to 226 of the Frenchman Brian Cocard. So yes, he's got a massive advantage. The main field, though, Phil, they really are hammering along. They're creeping up to almost 54 kilometres an hour right now for the race, and I don't think anybody would have expected quite a savage start. And look at the length of that main field. That really does indicate how quickly this main field is going. We haven't yet got to the difficult part of today's stage.
And look from the helicopter down there, these boys have not waited 1 minute to get under action today. They've pulled in a long straight line. 2 non-starters, sadly. Simon Gerrans, the champion of Australia, didn't take to the start. There was no point in him going for 2 more back-breaking days in the Pyrenees, because he has a major back problem. He's not recovered since that first day crash when he collided with, or when Mark Cavendish collided with him and took him out on the finishing line. He's never come back, and that's a great shame there. And also René Hollenstein has also gone, and he finished yesterday, Paul, with a punctured lung. Rito Hollenstein.
Yeah, he was involved in a nasty crash at the start of the race, got back up into the race, finished the stage, and then was taken to hospital afterwards and suffered an injury to his lung. I didn't actually understand the technical term as it came over, but it was very nasty to actually get up and finish the stage as he did.
Well, doctors recognise it as a serious situation, that he should not be riding his bike, so they actually stopped him starting today, apparently. Anyway, it was his first tour as well.
Now, this is the time when you're quite happy to not have a rider placed in the overall standings, and you can actually sit in the main field and get a free ride along for at least an hour or so before you start to get into the mountains. And you look up to the front of the main field and you see a team that's having to do all of that pacemaking. You think to yourself, oh, I'm glad that's not me.
Well, the river we'll see plenty of for the moment. It rises here. It's a Spanish and French river, but it comes out in France. It is the Garonne, and it drains out just around about Bordeaux into the ocean there. And the source is in the Spanish Pyrenees. So it's just beginning its long journey to the west of France.
Yeah, once again, quite interesting to note that Team Europcar have got 2 riders into this breakaway. Just sitting on the back there is Yukiya Arashiro, and the rider, his teammate just in front, Cyril Gauthier, one of the animators of yesterday's stage. So obviously, he's coming into the last week of this race in pretty good condition. Martin Elmiger in the red jersey with the white cross on it. He's champion of Switzerland. He's 2 times been the most aggressive rider of the Tour de France since the start. He's 4th time he's won the National Championship of Switzerland. That was the red flag there to indicate the riders are 1,000 meters away from the sprint point at Saint-Béat. And I wonder if there will be a sprint for this, or whether they'll continue to collaborate, because none of these riders are a threat in the points competition. But in fact, Cyril Gauthier has decided, I think, that he wants the extra 1,500 euros to drop into his back pocket. Just sitting on the back, Sergio Paulinho in the lime green, just ahead of Tom Jelte-Slagter of Team Garmin Sharp, Olympic silver medalist from Athens, and Jens Voigt, 42 years of age, 500 meters to go. That's Blel Kadri now taking up the pacemaking. Once they go through Saint-Béat, they start to go up this long valley road and head towards the town of Bossost, and that's where the first climb of the day will begin. But they are maybe 5 or 6 kilometers away from the Spanish border. That's Kadri on the front. And as he accelerates up to that, there's going to be no challenge here, and I think the reason for that is these riders need to keep themselves pretty organized and don't really need to sprint at this point. But look at the speed of the main field. It's 57 seconds, but they are absolutely flying along today. They're in the same town now, the little town of Saint-Béat. They're saying it's 1 minute the advantage, and only 3 riders doing the pacemaking on the front, and they're all riders from Team Katusha. Well, Peter Sagan, there are 8 riders clear. There are points for the first 15 riders to cross the line. I'd be surprised if Peter Sagan comes out at a point like this, but you can just see the 3rd different coloured jerseys down there are the dark green jerseys of Europcar. Well, that will be Brian Coquart, and he's being led out by, looks as if it's his teammate Redza. Well, right onto his wheel there is the green jersey of Peter Sagan. Coquart. And you see there's no challenge coming at all. Sagan, he doesn't want to push himself too much into the red zone. He crosses the line there, just in 2nd place, so he'll get a few extra points there in the green jersey points competition. But the main field is dragged out into a very, very long line. And the race radio is saying that it was exactly 1 minute on the finishing line for the sprint point there as we went through Saint-Béat. For Sagan, he'll be back into the group, back into the centre of the main field. So 92 kilometers to go, and still 8 leaders. So we've just gone through the sprint point in Saint-Béat after 31 kilometers covered. Blel Kadri was first across the line there, just ahead of Martin Elmiger, and on the sprint point the gap was just officially 1 minute to the main field. You just see on the top of the hill there the remains of the Saint-Béat castle, originally built in the 6th century. The domain became the property of the King of France in 1473, although the castle itself was changed and improved throughout the 12th and 15th century with the additions of walls. The tower is 5 meters high, and it was restored a little bit anyway in the 19th century, and it was a border defense between the Aran Valley and France. You can see there, that's a beautiful river just meandering down. That's the River Garonne. It hails actually way up in the Lleida region of Spain and meanders right the way down to join the Gironde and the Dordogne.
Well, as we spin around the beautiful scenery here, this is, as Paul said, the castle here in Sant Bea. We're now heading up, I think with the leaders, Paul, we're about 2.5, 3 kilometres from going into Spain. Passports not required, whatever nationality you are, in the Tour de France. They won't be getting off the bikes in that country because they'll find the Col de Portillon and come zooming back into France and down the Portillon and into Luchon, where we were yesterday for the finish.
I just noticed the flags at the side of the road. One of the reasons that we're riding quite so fast here is because coming up the valley there is actually quite a hard tailwind. There's Arashiro going through 152. Again, in the breakaway, Team Europcar have managed to place 2 riders into this move on a day like today. They're obviously looking for something out of the Pyrenees.
Long straight road this. The rider's going to take advantage of this lull, if you like, a lull which is being conducted in excess of 50 kilometres an hour, mind you. Katusha, they're very annoyed apparently at missing the move with Rodriguez, and that's why they've been told to try and limit its margin. They're not, in their words, chasing it down, but they don't want it to get much time today. Looking down, we're into the Spanish town of Ley now. We're about 3 kilometres inside French territory, as this is now the link, and we really are in the heart of the Pyrenees now. We're just doing a right-hand semicircle over French soil to go back into France and down to Luchon. Many of the riders and indeed officials who were in when the race finished in Luchon yesterday stayed in Spain.
Well, they wouldn't have had too much of a problem finding a nice tapas bar last night, so not too far away from the finishing line of yesterday's stage. Today we're making just that little incursion into Spain so as to be able to climb the first climb of the day, the Col de Portillon. You could say that is an hors d'oeuvre for the next climb. The second climb of the day is the Col de Peyresourde, which I've always found to be a very, very difficult climb. You climb away from Bagnères de Luchon, it's not so bad to begin with because you're in town, and then you get into a nice forested area. Once you leave the forested area, it is very open indeed, and the wind gets quite blustery up to the top of the Col de Peyresourde.
Get some idea just how fast these boys are going here as they come past this little gaggle of spectators. They're absolutely flying over what appears to be a beautifully surfaced road here in Spain. And Jens Voigt, the big train from Germany, look at him on the front. I still think he's announcing his retirement too soon, but he says he has a deal with his body. And the body says you can do 1 more year and then you've got to give me a rest.
Well, I think the ideal time to retire, Phil, is to be able to retire when your body tells you to, and I think Jens understands that. And it's good to be able to say for Jens Voigt that he's still competitive. He would not be the kind of bike rider who would like to be subjected to the power of the race and be stuck at the back end of the main field suffering. Here he's in the breakaway, he's contributing to the race itself, and I think that's the best way to stop, still at the top of your physical abilities.
Well, I'll tell you, Paul, later this year, Jens is coming to stay at my home in the UK. That's the good news. The bad news is he wants to go cycling every day.
Well, you can always do motor pace, Phil. You can ride behind him. Don't worry about your pride. Just sit behind big Jens Voigt and just pretend he's a big German motorbike.
Well, that's what he is, isn't it? John Gadret at the back of the race for Movistar, very active yesterday because Movistar as a team yesterday was superb, and Alejandro Valverde showed us a very solid man in second place overall, and I don't think he's lost sight yet of trying to win this race. Well, we'll see. 2 days today should today rather should give us pretty much a definitive idea of who will be the top 5 men into Paris. In which order, that might be a little bit more difficult. We'll see how they deal with Pla d'Udet. It's the 10th time the rides have finished on this mountain above the beautiful town of Saint-Oly-sur-Loing.
A little bit more of a report coming in on Simon Spilak. They're saying that it was actually a stomach bug which he's got, and that's the worst thing that you can get when you come into one of these big mountain stages. If you get some kind of intestinal problem, it's hard to recover because you just can't get the liquid in to keep yourself hydrated. So I feel sorry for him, just getting so close to the end of the race. And guess what day it is today, Phil? It's stage 17, my favourite.
Yeah, Paul Schoen rode the Tour de France 7 times. He wouldn't tell you. The 2 times he packed were on stage 17. And already we've had 2 non-starters and 1 rider give up. There's something about stage 17. It's always in the mountains.
Yes, it always seems to be a little bit of a turning point. Once you can get through stage 17, you can almost see the Arc de Triomphe and the Eiffel Tower on the horizon. But this gap has come down again. It's all because of one team doing the pacemaking. Although they seem to have shut off a fraction there, and obviously they're losing a bit of firepower, but they're doing the job that they've set out to do, and that is to nullify this first breakaway of the day. So this is Bossost, just across the border from France, just inside of the region of Lerida, and the river over to the left-hand side is looking really quite magnificent. Bossost on either side of the River Garonne, as the main field now, have done an incredible job there. Just sitting at the back, number 24. Well, that man has done an amazing amount of pacemaking, because he's brought it back to the 34-second advantage. That was Luca Paolini. Houses in this town actually have slate roofs. Well, the slate is actually mined in this area, which makes it one of the most beautiful little villages in this part of Spain. Even the steeple on the church is covered with slate. Right, now this is the start of the climb. It's starting to stretch back up again now as we begin the Col de Portillon. On the front, it's Sergio Paulinho. He will be doing this to make sure and try and drag this 8-man group clear to take the points over the top of the first climb of the day, the Col de Portillon. There are 10 points available for the first rider to cross the line. Of riders crossing the first 5 places get points. And now we're coming under a little bit of control now from Team Astana. There is the start of the climb. He's obviously got pretty good legs. He's looking back to see what sort of damage has been done, and that's Rodriguez who moves up alongside him. Now Rodriguez, is he going to go? Former champion of Spain. He really wants this. He knows that 44 seconds on the slopes of this climb, using the gradient, he might be able to bridge the gap.
And it looks as though Katusha, having lost Isachev at the back, has started a move.
Well, Joaquim Rodriguez knew he had to take a bit of responsibility himself. I think he wanted the race to be kept pegged. 50 kilometers an hour in the first part of this race, Phil. That's 31 miles an hour. That's a very fast average speed. Team Katusha did the job that they had to do. They had to peg the breakaway group, make sure that the advantage wasn't too much. And as soon as they started the incline at the beginning of the Col de Portillon, Joaquim Rodriguez has taken responsibility himself to try and get across the gap to the leaders. Here he is now.
Well, it was just after Katusha came off the front that their man has taken over. Now they're trying to sort out another breakaway here from the front of the peloton. No reaction from the yellow jersey in his team, but bet your life they'll be checking the numbers that go riding past them.
Well, Frank Schleck jumped across there in the red, white and blue at the back there, champion of Luxembourg. He's actually nurturing some pretty good form as we come down towards the last part of this race. But as you can see, the damage because of this slope is being done in the leading group. Tom Jelter-Slagter in the breakaway yesterday is struggling a little bit with the gradient here. Shakes his head. First participation in the Tour de France for him, and he's learning just how hard it is to be in a breakaway and come out and fight the next day.
I take my hat off to him. He can certainly read a race. He's been in the breaks all the time, but he hasn't had the legs yet to finish them off. And this is Geraint Thomas here as well, driving at the front.
Followed by Michael Rogers, the winner of yesterday's stage, who's looking up. It's amazing. Yesterday, Michael Rogers was looking to win the stage. Today, he's turned it around. His teammate for Rafael Majka. He's actually pacing his teammate, trying to get him across the gap to make sure that he can stay in with a chance of keeping the lead in the King of the Mountains competition. What a battle that's going to be over the next 2 days.
Now, this is happening on the lower slopes of the first climb of the day, the Col de Portillon, and the last 2 climbs are the ones that will cause all the damage. Alejandro Valverde here, Serpa just 2 riders behind him. Look at the peloton, what's happened to it?
Well, that is something they're going to have to pay serious attention to. Cast your mind back to 2012. Alejandro Valverde lost a lot of time before we got to the Pyrenees, but when we got into the Pyrenees, he was quite imperial. He was looking for the breakaway move.
The thing is that they know if they're going to gain the big time gaps and take them away from Nibali, they're going to have to attack early on today, and that's what they're doing. The first climb, the Col de Portillon, was not expected to do too much damage, but right now this peloton has integrated all over the mountain.
He has come across the gap. You might just have noticed there, Phil, number 21. There he is, just on the back of the group. Joaquim Rodriguez has bridged the gap to the leaders. That's what he wanted to do. But I tell you what, Team Astana have to be calm at a moment like this, because towards the end of yesterday's stage, the overall leader, Vincenzo Nibali, found himself isolated. As a leader of a bike race like this, Phil, you need to have your teammates with you for as long as possible, especially in a difficult stage like today.
This is Arnaud of France here, Arnaud Demar, and he's dropping back, still 72 kilometers, a long way when you're riding by yourself. Elimination could be a problem for him if he keeps at the back there. Big teammates required on the front there for Astana. This group is building. Majka is in this group, the current King of the Mountains leader.
Well, he's got Michael Rogers there up alongside him. Michael Rogers has come, paced him across this gap to make sure that the leader of the King of the Mountains is here. So you've got first and second place in the King of the Mountains competition are in that leading group of riders. And Jens Voigt, he doesn't care about anybody's reputation in a situation like this. He's quite happy to stamp away at the front.
Unbelievable. He sits on the front there. He started the break. He's enjoyed by some serious names here that eventually will have to cause a reaction from Nibali himself.
And so Rodriguez and Majka have come across to the gap. There are a couple of teammates in there for Majka. Obviously Paulinho, who was in the breakaway early on. Michael Rogers, I've seen, has got across the gap. But then Vincenzo Nibali, he doesn't need to panic. There's 5 kilometers to go to the top of the climb. So Nibali, I don't think under too much pressure here. He's just controlling the race. He's making sure that he doesn't eliminate too many of his teammates because of the pressure that can be applied early on. But damage because of this speed on this first climb of the day is seeing some of the big names disappear, some of the big names from the flatlands. Of course, that was Andre Greipel slipping away there. He rode through the mountains pretty well yesterday. Danny Pate, the American former under-23 world time trial champion. Slipping away now also Emmanuel Erviti of Movistar. Teams are seeing themselves have riders eliminated. Petit. And Jens Voigt, not concerned now. There you can see on the inside there in the red and white jersey, just behind Martin Elmiger, in the red jersey with a white cross on it, is the man who is second overall in the competition for the King of the Mountains, Rodriguez. Riding right alongside him was Rafael Majka.
Well, there is a reaction, 18 seconds. Concentration still on the face of Nibali, but I wonder what he's thinking, Paul. Climb 1 of 4, and they're hitting him.
Well, I think he won't panic right now. I think he's just keeping an eye on how things are developing. 18 seconds, Phil, let's put it into perspective. It's not massive margins. He doesn't want to respond violently to jump across that gap. And look how he's sensibly using his teammates to do the pacemaking. They will lift the pace up gradually to pull him up to that breakaway group. But there's a lot of riders really struggling on this second Pyrenean stage. Well, this is not the easiest way to get to King of the Mountains points.
I think they were just joined there by Chris Horner, well, which is incredible. He says he's going to go looking for a result today if he can. He said he was good yesterday. He hopes he's better today. We'll wait until we go back to that.
Well, there's no panic in the main field. They just seem to be keeping a fairly close eye on what's unfolding in front of them. And the yellow jersey, Vincenzo Nibali, seems quite calm. Jürgen Vandenbroek came to the front there for a moment, but I don't think they'll let him go anywhere.
Now, even though he's a little bit now, it's not Horner who's come up here, as we now see these 3 riders slowly being reeled back in by that group behind, which is the advanced group, with the yellow jersey group trying to get on terms again.
Yeah, that's Christian Durasek, the Croatian rider on Lampre, who's come across the gap, but they've not really started to open up the advantage. In fact, once they saw that they weren't really riding away, they slowed down a fraction, and the rest of that group, the remnants of that group, have come back. Now this is a little bit further back, the main field, and this is Pierre Rolland. Well, I figured he had to do something today. He had a pretty bad day yesterday. The man who had high hopes for France, finished previously 10th overall in the Tour de France. He sits 12th at the start of the day. And I figured if he wanted to peak inside of the top 10 by tonight, he had to go for a long raid. Jon Izagirre is the next man to move forward, the Spanish national champion.
Champion of Spain, Izagirre, now having a little bit of a dig as well. Paul, they have hit this climb at such speed, they're all hitting out at each other. they're going to have a real problem on the last two climbs today.
Well, there's not going to be very many left standing when we come to the final two climbs of the day. I think at the moment Team Astana are playing a waiting game. They're watching and not responding to these very violent attacks. It's actually sometimes a little easier. That's Reim Taaramäe coming through there, the rider from Cofidis. Jürgen van den Broek is the next rider to move forward. Vincenzo Nibali, look at him there. It looks like he's sitting in an armchair. He's just looking at the riders, checking the numbers, making sure it's not riders who he feels are dangerous in the overall standings, and he'll wait. If a move came from a Valverde or somebody else like Thibaut Pinot, then he would respond and lift up the pacemaking. But for the moment, he's just counting the numbers and seeing who's going clear.
Well, he's still got Pinot just behind him there. Laurens ten Dam is near him. So he's trying to move away from the peloton. The yellow jersey of the Tour de France, the riders immediately closest to him in the overall are all with him. So climb one going according to plan as far as he is concerned. And you might say, Paul, climb one's going according to plan as far as Rodriguez is concerned, in the lead.
Well, that's what he wanted. He started the day in second place. He made no bones about it, Phil, in the press. He said, look, I'm not going to win the Tour de France this year, but I would like to win the King of the Mountains competition. But the most dangerous rider in that group, I'd have to say, is Wout Mollema. He starts the day in 10th place, just 11 minutes down overall. And Alessandro De Marchi, let's not forget, what a great ride by him in all of the stages of the Tour de France. A very, very aggressive bike rider.
Well, at the top of the climb today, you can scoop up 80 points today, but the top of this first one is worth 10 points to the win on the King of the Mountains. Now, Bauke Mollema was seen to be fading the last 2 days, but this, we go to the top. Anybody going to take him on? Nicholas Roach thinks he might as they come up to the finish, but wow, that second kick, he's gone. That's what riding on home territory goes, because now he's about to go back into France. Joaquim Rodriguez becomes the leader on the road of the King of the Mountains.
Well, Phil, he's the virtual leader on the road with those 10 points. That'll knock him up now to 98 points. Nicholas Roach wanted to try and get across the line ahead of him there, but, you know, this man who's been a professional since 2001, he really has got an incredible turn of speed over the top of the climbs, and his challenger just goes over the top there in about third position. But for Rafael Majka, Phil, there are no points available for 10th or 12th place.
No, there isn't. 6 in that breakaway. If he led them over, he goes over in 7th. Just misses out there, which is a shame for him. Cyril Gauthier cramming the food down in the move since the start of the race today. Sits on the wheel of his team captain, Pierre Rolland. Good sweeping descent now.
Down there, by the way, is the Portillon Lake, which gives its name to the climb that we've just gone over, and a big chase on the descent because there was only about 13 seconds between the chase group and the leading 6 at the top of the climb.
Well, you can see the speed, the way they're dropping down here now. They're scurrying down back to Luchon now, where we finished the stage yesterday, and it's feeding time down there, down the main street in Luchon, and as soon as they leave the town, they will start the climb of the Col des Persaud.
Well, the way that rider went round the corner there looked very much like Pierre Rolland. As we get confirmation over the top of the climb, Rodriguez getting himself the maximum 10 points.
That gives him a 9-point lead in the competition for the moment. Still 70 more points at stake in that competition. If Rodriguez were to get them all, I think we could safely say he's won the King of the Mountains, but I've got a feeling that might not be the case.
Yeah, I think there's still a lot of racing to go. Those two groups, I would think, Phil, will get together on the descent before we get down into Bagnères de Luchon, and they will start this next climb, the climb of the Col de Persaud together. Interesting, though, that Pierre Rolland, who had jumped away from the main field, he has managed to get himself into the chase group. And I think with the performances of all of the young Frenchmen in the race yesterday, he's obviously going to be looking at a possibility of a long raid for himself. Cyril Gauthier, I think he got caught out a little bit in the crossfire on the descent.
Well, with somebody like Vasil Kirienka, the man in the black at the front now, who finished up in the places yesterday, he's on good form. He's coming through this tour stronger every day. He'll bring him across to that group just ahead. Still 6 riders up front, but they could well be joined very, very short. In fact, they have been joined now. We're getting quite a healthy group on the way down the mountain. Nick Roach, second up from the back of our pictures here. They went up the Col de Portillon in just over 20 minutes. The chasers went up 20 seconds slower. The peloton went up a minute and 20 seconds slower.
Well, the gap back to the yellow jersey group is a good minute and 16 seconds now. But the thing about Vincenzo Nibali, Phil, he's just got to pay attention to how this race develops, because he needs to keep as many teammates up alongside him as possible for the last 2 climbs of the day.
Although we've now brought together 22 riders, Nibali not only needs to watch the whereabouts of about 4 riders now in this Tour de France: Alejandro Valverde, Thibaut Pinot, Jean-Christophe Perrault and Romain Bardet. They're the nearest to him. And then you go to TJ Van Garderen, but he's 9.5 minutes behind after his bad day yesterday. So he's just going to monitor where they are and not worry too much about where these are at the moment.
No, it's a big group though that's formed, but it's again it's a slightly different stage because of the profile. Once we get to the next climbs of the day, the climb of Col de Peyrasourde is so hard. I can't really see this group staying together as a 20-man leading group, and I think 1 or 2 riders will find themselves getting tailed off once we start the Peyrasourde, especially once we start to get up to the high part of the climb, because that's where the steep gradients kick in.
2 riders from Team Sky have made it. One at the back here is Kirienka. The other one's up nearer the front is David Lopez. 3 riders from Movistar are here. Now that they could lay up a little bit of a battle plan for Valverde up in this break.
That's right. That's exactly why they've made themselves into this group. It's Herrada, Izagirre and Visconti. And the reason they've gone there is because they hope to get a little bit of a free ride over the next climb of the day, with the possibility of Alejandro Valverde coming out of the gap later on. I think Movistar are going into this last 3 days of the mountains with a very strong squad and a tactic to make sure, first of all, they can keep Alejandro Valverde in a podium position. And why not, if there is a problem coming to Vincenzo Nibali, they take advantage of a weakness or isolating him on the running towards the finish to try and launch Valverde closer to the top spot. A minute and 10 seconds. This is a long, it's a pretty treacherous descent as well. It's on the opposite side of the valley to Bagnères de Luchon, as they drop down here through the town of Saint-Mamet and then into Bagnères.
It's true, I love the people. It's inside of me. That's what it is. I hope that the people of the Tour will have a great memory of me. That's my only concern.
Daniel Monjas has been the voice of the Tour for 41 years and is as much a part of the race as many of the riders.
My parents always told me that the first words I said after Mum and Dad were Robic and Bobby. My life will have been a dream because as an adult I achieved the dreams I had when I was 3 or 4 years old. It was the 1974 Tour de France. It was my first Tour de France. It was a historical day for French cycling because Raymond Foulidor was 38 years old, the oldest riders in the peloton, and he was going to win the stage over Eddy Merckx, who was about 2 minutes behind him. Afterwards, I told myself when I'd finished my commentary I would never commentate again. My biggest regret on the Tour de France is I was never a Tour de France rider. They're people who've got unbelievable stories about the crashes they've had, the things that they've overcome and come back. The strength of their character really should be more highlighted because it's a force which is exceptional. It's certainly the most demanding of all sports. It affects us in our heart and in our minds. The death of Fabio Casatelli was the worst day of my life, the worst night on the Tour de France, because I couldn't sleep at all. I had to introduce the riders again the next morning. After not sleeping, I was thinking about his wife and his family. The time trial of Le Mans and Fignon, the 8 seconds, when Fignon passed me on the other side of the Champs-Élysées, they were perfectly equal on time overall. And then, of course, the finish at Alpe d'Huez with Hinault and Le Monde together. I've always said I will leave the Tour de France, but the Tour de France will never leave me. It's part of my childhood. It's part of my life as an adult. It's always been part of my life. But it'll be a bit quieter now.
And what about when you pass to the other side?
I'd like to be welcomed by Jacques Anquetil, and he could tell me, well, you're here now. We can organise a Tour de France in paradise.
Down the main street now, normally a real hubbub of people enjoying this town. Coffee shops and magazine shops, spas, but not today. They're watching the passage of the Tour de France.
Yeah, well, not too much time to stop and enjoy Bagnères de Luchon, because as soon as they go through town, Phil, they take a left-hand turn away from the town centre, and it's immediately onto the slopes of the next climb of the day. And it's a climb that I think will strike fear into many of the riders here. It's a climb that goes up for 13 kilometres, and it's almost the same gradient the whole way up, 7 and 8%. There's only a little bit of respite in the middle once they get to the small town of Cateau de la Broste, and that's where it goes down to a measly 4%. So, bienvenue au Tour de France de Bagnères de Luchon. Welcome to the Tour de France as we look down on one of the old buildings down there, a former spa town, Bagnères de Luchon, which became very popular in the late 1800s. And the old casino building just not too far away from the riders. Now just looking, the race radio saying there's been another crash on the descent, and that was Michael Kirel, a rider from AG2R, as we reach now the début de ravitaillement. And this is the chiseled face of Vasily Kirienka. Shouting to the man, he's shouting for water, takes that on board very, very quickly indeed. This man has decided, having been in the breakaway yesterday, he's going for a long one.
Well, just take a look at this, Paul, because this is our man who did so well yesterday, Mikel Kwiatkowski. He's got his place up amongst the leaders in the top 9 riders now. Pulled back a lot of time yesterday as we go across Luchon here.
Yeah, I was going to say, Phil, that was a phenomenal performance by him yesterday to move himself right the way back up into the top few in the overall standings. Get a chance to look down there at the church of Notre-Dame de l'Assomption. But more importantly, we're about to start the climb. I didn't see the start of the climb because we were going through the feeding station. But Vasily Kirienka, having been in the breakaway yesterday, thought, well, I don't want anybody else with me here this afternoon. I'm going for it.
Well, he was third yesterday, beaten only by Michael Rogers and Tommy Vauclair. Riding in his 5th Tour de France here. Been eliminated a couple of times, Kirienka, over the years. He's a great worker for his team. Now he's free to race for himself, as he's clearly got great climbing legs yesterday, and maybe he feels the same way today. This climb is 8.2 miles long. There's only 26 miles to go when we're over the top, and we top out at just a shade under 5,150 feet today. And we've seen the crowd, Paul, they're huge.
Yes, they are massive, and as I said, this is a fairly steady gradient for the whole of the climb at between 7 and 8%, although in the middle they get a bit of respite. It flattens out to 4%, but I remember this climb from when I was racing. It is a horrendous climb because of the consistency of the gradient all of the time, this 7 and 8%. But once you climb away from the bottom part of the climb where Kirienka is at the moment, it's nice here, it's forested, it's almost beautiful. You climb away from the trees, you climb away through a small little village halfway up the climb, and then it becomes open, and that's where the wind gets a little bit blustery.
Little bit of a wry smile there on Rafael Majka's face as he climbs steadily behind Nicholas Roach, rather, in this leading group now. They came together on the descent of the Portillon. Starts very gentle, this climb, and then it gradually builds and it gets pretty hard towards the summit.
Yep. Team Astana, I think they've got everything pretty much underhand, as they can see the turquoise jerseys. The Armada of Vincenzo Nibali just sitting on the front. And now a little move coming from the group. Now this is Bout Mollema. he was quite happy to get into that group. You see the reaction coming very, very quickly from Movistar. They've jumped across the gap there. They've said, right, we have to accompany, we have to stay in these moves. I think because the group got to be so big, and that's Jürgen van den Broek coming across now in the red and white jersey, and that is of Lotto Belisol. Giovanni Visconti is the rider, just getting onto the back wheel there. Movistar, I think, will follow all of these moves here this afternoon.
Well, I must say, Bauke Mollema here is looking so much more animated. The rider who rode so well to a top 6 finish in the Tour last year looked to be dropping away, and it was his teammate Laurens ten Dam who put 3 minutes into him yesterday and got ahead of him in the overall classification. Well, it looks today as though Mollema is going to get his own back here.
Yeah, well, Phil, just for 30 seconds, if you took 30 seconds off his time, he would be climbing back up into 7th or 8th position at the end of today's stage. And as you can see, again, Nicholas Roach has responded there in 3rd position in the fluorescent jersey. He wants to be in any of these moves going clear this afternoon, but it is really starting to be quite tough. This gradient's kicking in.
Our early stage winner, the first for France in the opening week of the Tour, Blel Kadri, who was in the move, looks as though he's falling back here. Neutral service asking if he's got a problem. He might want a drink of water.
I remember this climb. It's a horrendous climb. One year we started the Tour de France and the race actually started right at the bottom of this climb. We went for about a 35-minute warm-up before the start, and still the race went from the ground straight out of the starting blocks.
Well, they're going to see what they can do. He's got a problem.
Got a problem with his front derailleur.
It looks like it. And right up behind the lone leader here now is the Sky Jaguar car there, as Kirienka looks at the board, gives it a good stir, checks out all the numbers.
Well, he wants to just check and make sure he knows exactly how the race is unfolding behind him. In fact, the group behind him now is looking at 1 minute and 45 seconds while we go back here to Blel Kadri. His own team cars come up alongside him now to try and figure out what the problem is. The problem is, on a climb like this, you don't really want to stop at the side of the road and try and fix something. And in fact, already Alejandro Valverde, the man who starts the day in 2nd place in the overall standings, he tried to resolve the mechanical problems that he had on the early part of this climb. Then all of a sudden he decided he better resolve them quickly and changed over to a new bike. Just here we've got Blel Kadri about to catch up with Cyril Gauthier. He has the red number on as the most aggressive rider of yesterday's stage. Now, this is, you know, it's pretty nasty to have a problem like this once you get into a mountain stage. And again, it doesn't quite look as if he's managed to resolve that issue. It's down over to the far side there. That is the small church of Sainte-Anne. That originally built in around about the 12th century, and a real good example of the early southern Romanesque style. It's extremely thick walls, and as you can see, a quadrangular bell tower, which is very typical in the l'Arbuste Valley, reminiscent very much of the bell towers from Lombardy.
1 kilometre to the summit. He's going to get the points over the top, that is for sure. Doesn't need them, but he's not thinking of points in the King of the Mountains. He is thinking of winning today's stage. Second on the road still is Nicholas Roach here, and Jesus Herrada, champion of Spain last year, lost the title just before the Tour started to a teammate. Get some idea of the heights. Those people are looking down on the riders here. We'll be up with them shortly.
Yeah, but Kirienka here, Phil, he just looks, doesn't look at all like a rider under any kind of stress. He's getting that wind I was telling about, the blustery wind as you get up to the Col de Peyresourde, but that's why he's riding close to the spectators. Although there's no wind, there's no trees to shelter him from the wind, keeping up close towards the side of the ride like this, and the spectators, that shelters him a little bit from the blustery wind. As these two, they don't feel confident, they keep looking over their shoulders. They are starting to close down the gap a little bit. It's 1.5 minutes now, and Nick Roach riding in the famous wheel marks of his dad, who won the Tour de France back in 1987. Nicholas Roach has been a pro since 2005. at the arrière du peloton. These are riders now starting to struggle just a bit. Number 72 there is Jan Bakelants. 89, Christophe Riblon, a winner of 2 stages in the Tour, including Alpe d'Huez last year. He wears the yellow helmet as team leads the team competition.
Looking at poor old Christophe Riblon here, he's a pretty good climber, but he's in trouble on the Col de Peyresourde. This is the leader now, and he's about 400 meters from the summit of the climb. And just on the way down, Paul, he only has to look across the valley, or not with it. Yes, we're being joined up here. No, I'm sorry, this is the Jesus Herrada where we've come up to. I thought we'd come up on the back there of Vasil Kirienka, who is now near the summit of the climb.
Now, Kirienka is still looking at a good 1.5 minutes advantage over these 2 chasers, but these 2 keep looking over their shoulders to see what the position is of the race that's going on behind them, because as far as they're concerned, they just want to go over in second, third. More importantly for Nicolas Roche, to grab the points in the King of the Mountains competition and try and steal them away from Joachim Rodriguez.
Well, there he is, Kirienka. And he's now a couple of 100 meters from the summit of the climb here. Now, once he starts the descent, he will see the slopes of the next climb, the Valorin-Azé climb. And you'll see it because it's full of people on top waiting to see him. It's quite a steep little climb, this one, and a very, very narrow descent. There's the summit. Big moments for Team Sky over the top of Kirienka, because they won this Tour de France the last 2 years, and at this stage of the race they were totally dominating the last 2 years. Now they've got their man in the front trying to fly the flag once more. Nice to see Nicolas Roche. I think this team feeds off itself. The team Tinkoff Saxo, which lost their leader on the 10th day, Alberto Contador. Now they've had 2 stage wins, and for my money, they decided last night it's time to try and get Nicolas Roche a stage win.
Well, Nicolas Roche won a stage of the Tour of Spain last year, finished 5th overall. He's a very talented bike rider, and I think once he decided not to race for the overall standings in races like the Tour de France, he's found a little bit more freedom. He came to this race as a helper for Alberto Contador, and with Alberto Contador's retirement with a broken tibia, I think all of the riders on Tinkoff Saxo now have got that little bit of freedom to try and enjoy the race as much as they can.
So Roche and Jesus Herrada come up to the summit. The clock telling us here that it's going to go over the top, just about 1 minute and 11 seconds as Roche starts. 1:12 as they start the descent. Not a long descent, but quite a difficult one.
No, it's a pretty quick descent. There's no nasty little corners to catch the riders unawares, and we'll probably be going downhill at very high speeds. As you can see Rodriguez lining up to grab himself a few points. That's Arashiro on the front. This is the move by Rodriguez. He looks over his shoulder to see if he's got a shadow, and yes, he has. And it's Rafael Maika. As the over the top, it's going to be 4th place for Rodriguez, 5th place for Maika. They'll both get points, but again, a few extra points for the former champion of Spain as they go over the top. And he's probably starting to think now that there's a big possibility that this breakaway on a day like today may well survive, because they're looking at 3 minutes over the yellow jersey group of Vincenzo Nibali and Thibaut Pinot. Kirienka on this descent. As I said, it's a pretty wide road. The surface is good. There's no really tricky corners as he, you see, moves away, cuts across and tries to take as straight a line as possible around these corners. If we got a chance to look at the speedometer on the motorbike, it would probably be up around 100 kilometers an hour currently, which is 62 miles an hour.
Well, as we dodge around the real centre of the Alps, of the Pyrenees rather, on the borders with Spain. We've been into Spain today. The peloton will whip down this very quickly and then switch on to the next climb of the day. Now, Jakob Fuglsang has dropped out of this group. I'm not sure whether he dropped out voluntarily to go back to his leader or whether he's got a problem, but we're going to find out certainly over the top of the next climb.
Well, I think technically the reason he got into that group early on, Phil, was just to have a power of numbers. So we did notice yesterday on the final climb of the day that the yellow jersey, Vincenzo Nibali, was just a little bit isolated. Eventually, no teammates around him at all. And that puts a rider into a very difficult and precarious situation in the mountains. Because if you have a mechanical with no teammates up alongside you, sometimes the team car can be as much as 2 or 3 minutes behind. And then you've lost the race and the overall lead completely.
It's a very nice town too. We're only going to see it briefly because once in we're out and we're on the climb. This next climb is taking us up to 5,184 feet, so it's about 30 feet higher than the Col de Peyresourde, but it's shorter and much steeper. Yellow jersey continues to go heading down towards that same left-hand turn. The chase group should be just about getting there now with the two men who are trying to catch up with Kirienka, Roach and Jesus Herrada.
Just lining up behind the yellow jersey there, who's in about 7th position. There's the black and red jerseys of BMC. They're looking after TJ Van Garderen. Here's a chance to see the descent coming down here.
Some very sharp bends on this descent, and they're even sharper on the next one, and going to narrow wall buildings as well. So thank heavens it's dry, but they're going to have to be vigilant.
Yes, I have to say, I remember a stage finish coming down into Loudonville a couple of years ago, because as they charged down the descent, it looked very much as if Andrea Perron was going to get himself the stage victory, and all of a sudden a certain Gilberto Simoni came charging back, and everyone thought he'd be too tired to go for the sprint. But guess what? He was first man to cross the line.
Beautiful sprint, beautiful descent here, high speed at the moment. These boys taking no risks as they prepare for what is the last day in the piece. These are those narrow roads here with these buildings right up to the edge of the road. They can be quite dangerous in a big pack. Still Kirienka on the way down, looking pretty cool. He's made a good move, but he knows he's got 2 mountains to climb yet before he runs out the winner.
Now on the front, FDJ. Now FDJ were very animated yesterday when they were trying to set up a situation where they were looking to move their man Thibaut Pinot that little bit higher in the overall standings. We've just gone through the small town with the leaders of Armontuel, a picturesque little village, as we now start to drop down into Loudonville. Loudonville, which saw a stage victory for Laurent Brochard in the Tour de France a number of years ago, when he was world champion. Pied du Col de Peyresourde, that is the foot of the Col de Peyresourde, which is behind us at 3 kilometers. The next climb of the day is the Col du Val-Luron d'Azay. It climbs up to 1,580 meters, which is 1,580 meters, which is 5,180 feet. This is second and third place rider on the road. Nicolas Roach in first place there, a former high finisher in the Tour de France, but in the last couple of years he rode for AG2R for almost the whole of his career. Then all of a sudden he decided he could make a lot better rider of himself by being a team helper to guys like Alberto Contador. He's 118 behind.
Well, as we wander around the Pic de Luisteau, let me tell you that we're now in the valley and we're about to start our 3rd climb of the day, and the hardest so far.
Well, just not too far away from where we are, the Pic de Luisteau just happens to be the frontier and the watershed of this area. It's situated in France. It's the secondary summit of the gateway to the north, the Schrader Peak.
Next stop is the climb to Col de Val-Luron. Takes us up to 1,580 meters. If you like it in feet, 5,184 feet.
I think I'll stick with the meters. It sounds a lot lower. And that comes after 100.
Rein Taaramäe just hasn't recovered, Paul. He's off the back again now.
Yeah, he's really struggled. I think he was happy to get into the breakaway. This man, though, he's at the bottom of the descent. He's done 2 climbs so far, and he doesn't look like a man who's going to weaken. And I still have to go back to saying what we were saying just a little bit earlier. Part of his preparation was part of the lead-out train for Chris Froome. Before that, it was part of the lead-out train with Richie Porte from Australia of Bradley Wiggins. So he knows how to ride this constant tempo in the mountains. He's almost become like a metronome. He will tap out 380 watts climb in and climb out, and it's up to the others to hope that he's going to weaken, but he's built in a way that he probably won't weaken even when it comes up to the final climb of the day.
Well, where Kirienka is now are very close to where the finishing line was in 1997 when Laurent Brochard was the winner for France. But I'm afraid this time we're now going up the mountain and out of the valley and onward to Saint-Laury-Soulon. The determined faces of the soldiers of the man in yellow there. They're doing their job for as long as they can, and at the end of the day then he's going to have to do it all for himself. But look how small that main field has become just by the tempo riding of Team Astana. 8.5% just here.
Yeah, it's a very difficult climb. There you can see this is what we could see from the valley below, the long line of camping cars parked all the way up this climb. And as you see, the climbs here in the Pyrenees are pretty narrow. It'll be interesting to see what it's going to be like tomorrow when we move away from here and continue to some of the even higher spots like the Tourmalet and Hautacam.
Sign on the right there for Kirienka, wouldn't have had time to read it. It showed us the gradient, the distance and the height we were at and how far to go. And the final run-out height, which is 1,580 meters. This is part of the Route de Pyrénées for the cyclists that come here all throughout the summer, past storming, seeing how many of these they can climb in a day. But they don't have quite so many spectators when they do it.
No, when the local cyclists come and do it, it's pretty much in solitary. But look at that. You need a second-hand camping car? Well, there's a few for sale there, maybe.
25 kilometers to go for Vasyl Kirienka here, sticking to his job in hand. He's gone 4 seconds better on this climb. He was in the reverse. He's pushed it out again now. 1:03. Just 4 minutes back to the peloton, and the peloton is getting so small now you can just about count it on 2 hands. But the men that matter in this tour are still locked in together there. Kirienka about 63 seconds ahead of the main pack of chasers.
The face here of Vincenzo Nibali, he doesn't show any emotion at all. He's just counting the days away. He's so far, Phil, I would have to say, has been a very good statistician. He's played his tactics out properly. He's watched the other teams try and play their tactics out on the road. Joaquim Rodriguez, though, will be waiting for the top of the climb. And, you know, Nicolas Roche has done a great job. And they're not far away from the back end of Kirienka. Is he going to survive to get himself the 10 points? Or is Joaquim Rodriguez going to come out of that pack? Because the former Spanish champion, Phil, has got an unbelievable acceleration in the last 500 meters of a climb like this.
It is possible. As Kirienka clearly has misjudged the distance here, because here they come, and it's Nicolas Roche, rather, who is bringing them around that bend, and they could well jump and take him out here as they continue on the climb. Rodriguez is third man in our picture in the red, the man he wants to get the better of. He wears the King of the Mountains jersey. Majka, 20 points for the winner, but the next 5 get places, and there's still a chance here, Paul. But remember how Rodriguez left the pack in Mende when he won a stage a few years ago.
Yeah, there are 10 points for a first category climb up to the summit here, and Nicolas Roche has done the job there as we come up towards the top of this climb. He's nailed back the lone leader, so they will now be leading for 10 points. Watch out for the man in third place in that line of riders coming. Look at the face, though, of Nicolas Roche. You know, this is what a team is all about, Phil. He's hurting himself, but not for his own glory here this afternoon. It's for his teammate right on his wheel.
Well, a big effort being made. Is it going to pay dividends now? Because it looks to me as Rodriguez is flexing those muscles, waiting for the chance. He's building. He's like a spring being wound up here, and he's in a perfect position as he tries here.
Well, he's just waiting. You know, he is the master of the acceleration at the top of climbs like this. He looks to me as if he's in the right gear. As you said, Phil, there he goes. There's the move and the acceleration. I don't know anybody can respond. Majka's trying.
Well, Majka took a look at him and didn't bother. Then he thought, well, I better give it a go, and he's gone after him last, and he's left it late. But now Rodriguez is grinding up, and now he's into his slipstream here, Majka. This may not be a foregone conclusion. Johnny Zagira is the man just behind him, and look at this. Majka is taking him on, but the benefit of the bend has given it to Rodriguez.
Was that the benefit of the bend, or was it the benefit of experience? Because at 35 years of age, Joaquim Rodriguez, Phil, he's a tough cookie to crack. Well, that's good. That's another 10 points in the bag for him. But let's not forget There's a huge count on the final climb of the day. There are 50 points. Normally it's 25, but it's the last climb of the day, doubled up to 50 points for the winner of the stage. Ooh.
It could, yes, whoever wins could well be the leader between those two. In fact, Nibali himself, if he got 50 points, could be the leader of the King of the Mountains. Now there is Vincenzo Nibali, still climbing, some 3 minutes behind, but closing quick. He got an SMS from the Prime Minister of Italy last night to invite him to the palace to come and meet him with his yellow jersey when he gets home. He replied saying, "If I win, I accept, but I haven't won yet."
Well, that won't be the only president he's likely to meet either, Phil, because obviously the president of Kazakhstan has been following this with great interest as we look at Vincenzo Nibali. And again, the man in the white, Thibaut Pinot, is riding well. And a massive reduction there. TJ Van Garderen just staying in contact. Richie Porte under a little bit of pressure here, but he's getting himself into a bit of a rhythm now. It doesn't look as if he's suffering just as he was a few days ago. But when you're not high in the overall standings, you lose that little bit of a desire to hurt yourself quite so much. Looking back, Laurens ten Dam is the rider just slipping onto the back. As in third position there is Romain Bardet, who is in second place in the Best Young Rider competition. He's in fifth place overall. Jean-Christophe Perrault is there as well, so too is Alejandro Valverde. This is really a very, very small group being formed at the front. Van den Broek is 20 seconds behind the leaders going over the top of the Col de Valuron. As we can see, Lel Kadri, who was in that early breakaway, he's really struggling now to just get his body over the top of this climb, and he's a rider who's been extremely aggressive. You just got a chance to look over to the left-hand side, albeit rather briefly, and that's how high up these riders have climbed. And very brief look there at number 88, 188. 20 kilometers to go now on the descent, back with a group that is reformed at the head of the race. We're looking now at 13 leaders, well, soon to be 14, because Jürgen van den Broek has taken a couple of risks on the descent and he's back in contact. Thibaut Pinot leads him over the top around that tricky little corner, followed there by Bardet. Yellow jersey, Vincenzo Nibali, he won't take any risks on the descent like this. He knows that he could lose an awful lot with a mechanical incident or an accident on the descent, but he's a great bike handler. A bit further back as we come up to the summit of the climb. These are the riders who've tailed off in the final few kilometers. We could see a little bit of a regrouping on the descent now as we look there at Nelson Oliveira, the champion of Portugal. So the two Frenchmen, they've taken off. They combining their forces, Pinot and Bardet, while the experienced Vincenzo Nibali, right, I'll take the opportunity of this descent to keep myself topped up with food. I'm not going to panic. I will allow these youngsters a little bit of freedom. And he's, you know, maybe yesterday on the running towards a finish, the American rider TJ Van Garderen had forgotten to eat and keep his energy levels topped up, and that is what Birali is trying to prevent. Thibaut Pinot, there is the yellow jersey. This is a very small group of riders. Valverde is in there with Nibali. He's got his teammate Kanget. We're still looking up and down this mountain to see if we can find any sign or indication of Jakob Fuglsang. And that's a little bit of a surprise. Bardet had a bad day yesterday, lost a little bit of time on the running towards the finish, but he had teammates up along, took plenty of risks. He finished 30th on the stage yesterday for a man who'd led the white jersey for quite some time. Lost a few minutes, lost 10 minutes on the leader, but more importantly about a minute and a half, and now he's seen this as an opportunity to ride. Being chased there by the white jersey. It's almost a little bit of, this is the duel that the French wanted. They've wanted this in cycling for quite some time to come. And a bit of a surprise because Perrault looks to me to be the rider who's taken up the chase. So leading the race, 14 riders. Kirienka has been caught and passed and left behind on the descent. It's Herrada, Izagirre and Visconti, the three riders from Movistar. Maika and Roche in this group as well. De Marchi has managed to get back onto the group. Mollema, Durasek, Van der Broek, Moinard, Roland, and Frank Schleck, they're saying, is in the group, although I haven't seen him for a little while. Almost took a bad line into that corner there as we started to go down into the corner. We're in now the town of Azé. That's the Church of Notre Dame de l'Assomption over on the right-hand side. This is the Groupe Maillot Jaune. This is the leader on the road, Romain Bardet. His gap around about 10 seconds over the chasers. Back with the yellow jersey group. 16 kilometers to go now. 10 miles of racing. Valverde has got a teammate in the group with him, and that will be an advantage. Nibali has a teammate with him as well. That's Kangert. Perrault is in the group. He's got a teammate, Gastauer, up there, as well as Pinot. Bardet using a lot of effort on this descent now, 23 years of age.
15.5 kilometers, and we are flying down the mountain. As we didn't expect, it is all over the road now. We've still got these riders up front. Kirienka caught and dropped, but Romain Bardet is really testing his French rival Thibaut Pinot, and Pinot hates going down hills, and Bardet knows it.
Well, he's taken this opportunity to attack on the downhill part of the course, Phil, but that can actually go against him when we come up to the final climb of the day, because he's going to use an awful lot of energy on this downhill section, and that could go against him. Bardet has got a 15-second advantage over the yellow jersey group. That's not really very much when you consider the amount of effort he's putting in to get into the start of the climb in first place.
Well, we're looking here at Bardet riding 2 minutes behind the leading bunch of 14. And none of those riders affecting the destiny of the yellow jersey. We're watching a lot of infighting on the yellow jersey group as well. And these are the very narrow roads on the descent which we knew about, and I hope the riders did too, because Vincenzo Nibali almost crashed a few moments ago.
Yes, a very tricky little corner. He took a very fast line into it and had to change his line halfway around the corner. Looking here at the Tête de la Course, this is the leading group, which is now 14 riders. A bit of a daredevil descent by Jürgen van den Broek, got himself back into contact. This man is 2 minutes, the man we're looking at here, when we can stay with. Oh, and he's taking lots of risks, Bardet, Phil.
He is.
You know, but he doesn't care. He's got 2 days in the mountains to try and move up from 5th place overall to a podium position. He is fighting for a podium position for France this afternoon. He doesn't care about the fact that Thibaut Pinot comes from France as well. He wants Romain Bardet to lead the Best Young Riders competition. He wants Romain Bardet to be on the podium in Paris.
It's a big thing for the French to be best Frenchmen in the Tour de France, and they've always attacked one another throughout time. And we've had some great rivalries because of it, not least Raymond Poulidor and Jacques Anquetil. This is a fantastic move by Bardet. It's almost a desperate one. Today and tomorrow, he knows if he's not ahead of Pinot, he probably never will be before Paris. He's got to bridge the gap. He lost a lot of time yesterday, but it's not unbridgeable at all. This man is absolutely throwing all safety precautions to the wind.
Yes, just think, Phil, 23 years of age, and he's really trying to do something very special here this afternoon. You know, he is one of the future stars of French cycling. You know, he turned professional towards the end of 2012, and he's only 23 years of age. He was 10th this year in Liège-Bastogne-Liège, and he shows no fear of the reputations of some of the big guys. His teammate in the group behind, though, Jean-Christophe Perrault, well, he's not chasing at all this afternoon. He's giving his own teammate the advantage, and they're forcing the white jersey leader, Thibaut Pinot, to do the pacemaking.
Yes, Pinot looking around here. Bardet has to get 1 minute and 34 seconds by the finishing line over that man in the white jersey to reclaim the 3rd place he had in the Tour de France at the start of racing yesterday. This is Janson, again the last survivor on the front for FDR, helping his teammate as he did yesterday. And look at the other two, 1st and 2nd in the Tour de France, the man in the dark jersey and the yellow jersey, Valverde and Nibali, following each other everywhere down the mountain.
I'm not sure that this move by Bardet is going to pay off, because once this group, Phil, hits the climb, they're going to go up the climb very, very quickly indeed.
It is very steep.
It is. The first 3 or 4 kilometres are very steep and around about 10%. Jurgen van der Broek sees the attack going now as we cross the valley floor now. This is the town of Saint-Lary-Soulon. It is the base of the Pla d'Adet climb. We're in department number 65. And that little move coming from one of the riders from Europcar. Just looking for the group. There we go. Up there is Peter Velits into 3rd position. Sitting on the Bauke Mollema. He started the day in 10th place overall. As we scoot across the gap here to just check and see which one of the riders it was who made the move there coming from Europcar. In fact, the group has split up a little bit. That's Nicholas Roach who made that move.
Now, this is not a climb that keeps any secrets, is it, Paul? You can see it going up the mountain. It is horrible. And it's long roads as well. We first came here back in 1974. The crowds were huge, and Raymond Poulidor, great French cyclist, was the winner then. And there could be a French winner yet today.
Yes, funnily enough, when Raymond Poulidor won that stage, he left behind him a certain Eddy Merckx on the roads. Although Eddy Merckx withheld the yellow jersey at the end of the day, he went on to win the Tour de France. It was the day after Bastille Day, and Raymond Poulidor really received the accolades of the French car. Pierre Rolland there in the dark green jersey.
Oh, he was looking the wrong way when Nicholas Roach put in that kick. I must say, Paul, they're delivering the blows to each other before we even get onto the climb here.
No, they certainly are, and it's going to come as a bit of a shocker to these riders, Phil, if they haven't been and checked this climb, because the first few kilometres of the climb are around about 10% gradient.
There's a lot of black on our contours of this climb. Vignac is the next village just outside of Saint-Lary-Soulon. We climb the Pla d'Adet, 6.3 miles to the finishing line now, 5,427 feet at the top. And as you can see, we're just on 10 kilometres to go. As the riders come into view, these are the leaders of an extraordinary attacking day of the Tour de France. 10 kilometres to go. This little group containing Nicholas Roach on the left have gone clear. It looks as though Peter Velits has come up as well.
Armel Moinard, there were 2 riders.
Okay.
Yeah, but in that group as well, Visconti, this man has really thrown caution to the wind. He's the next rider on the road. He's 1 minute and 40 seconds behind that leading group. Romain Bardet today has said, I want to stamp my authority on the Pyrenees. Yep, I had a bad day yesterday, but I'm bouncing back.
Well, these are moments that FDJ have been put on the offensive. They're not racing the yellow jersey, they're racing the man just ahead who he doesn't want to steal Thibaut Pinot's white jersey, his best young rider in the Tour de France and top Frenchman, more importantly. Massive crowd here. We're downtown in the basement, and they'll go and watch it on television as all the rides will pass through onto the last climb of the day.
The dangerous thing, I think, happening here, Phil, there's Kirienka just getting picked up by this group. The dangerous thing is Alejandro Valverde has got 2 teammates in this group, and he's got 3 teammates up the road. Now, if this is the day that Alejandro Valverde wants to make the move, tactically, he's in a very good situation. He's got the strength of numbers, his teammates up alongside him.
4 riders up front. Visconti is the rider setting the pace. Nicholas Roach, Amiel Moignard and Pierre Rolland, who tried to start the move and in the end seems to have got in it as we now start the last climb of the day. And an attack immediately by Roach, and they're all going to answer it.
Well, it's Visconti, former Italian national champion, comes straight across the gap there. Pierre Rolland in the darker green jersey comes up to him, but Roach couldn't continue there, so he sat down in his saddle, and even Amiel Moignard of BMC rides back to the 4-man leading group again.
Now 10% here. This is one of the first ramps in black on our contour.
Well, the gap back to the yellow jersey group has come down pretty dramatically, and I'm not sure that's enough. If they try this attacking and slowing down move here, Phil, they look to me as if they may well get caught. Romain Bardet is the man who's riding across the gap. He's got 14 riders ahead of him on the road, but he is, if you like, the best of the rest. He's 1 minute and 33 seconds behind the leaders on the road, but he's 40 seconds ahead of the yellow jersey group, and he's trying to ride himself, first of all, to a podium position, but mainly he's looking to try and take the white jersey of the best young rider away from this guy. He needs 134 at the end of the day if he's going to do that.
Well, there's 3 bike races on at the moment as we watch Visconti now launch an incredible acceleration. They looked at each other. This time they couldn't answer. Roche wants to. Pierre Rolland has done. Roche has got to take his back wheel. Moignon is content to follow the moves just now.
Yeah, Pierre Rolland said he needed to find a big raid in the Pyrenean Mountains to stamp his name back into the Tour de France history books. He's won 2 stages of the Tour de France in the past. I think probably the most famous one, Phil, would have to be the stage victory that he took at the summit of Alpe d'Huez. And he's clawing his way back. Well, he just about got there and said to Nicolas Roche, come on, mate, it's up to you now to close down the rest of the gap.
Everybody using the strength here, and let's not forget that Giovanni Visconti in January this year broke his right tibia in the Tour Down Under, the Santos race in Australia, and to put it in the right place in South Australia, and he's recovered to do this on the Pla d'A.
So
well, terrific pictures on the wall there. This is the corner of Poulidor, the first man to win when we came up here for the first time in 1974. And that's him, Poo-Poo they called him. Never wore the yellow jersey in the Tour de France, but was on the podium more than anybody else.
And he's still on the Tour de France today in the publicity caravan, having followed 52 Tours de France. That is amazing.
And he's still just as popular. He looks exactly the same, apart from his white hair, quite frankly. Now this man, let's not forget him, because he's doing a great ride in no man's land here. He's now 2 minutes 1:58 ahead of the yellow jersey group, and now that means if he really is 2 minutes ahead, and I think he is, he's got his white jersey back if he can continue it to the summit.
Well, his teammate up alongside him, Pierre Rolland, tried to make the move, but I think he just pushed himself into a little bit of oxidant debt. The maximum gradient of this climb is 10.3%, and this is the steepest part that we're on as we look at these riders and Pierre Rolland. It gets not very much easier because it levels out to 9.8 and then 8.8, so forget about finding an easy part on today's stage.
No, it's just before we finish, it's really steep, and they're going to have to catch the riders, that's for sure, as they come up to the line. Well, Visconti and Nicolas Roche are together. Roche, remember, has been on the attack on the Col de Peyresourde. That didn't work. He's got into this group right at the bottom of Pla d'A. Meanwhile, at 1:55, the yellow jersey and the white jersey climb steadily here. We're in a group that's getting smaller, but still in that group is TJ Van Garderen. An attack by Visconti. Roche, can he react again?
Well, I wonder what Nicolas Roche's dad, Stephen, is thinking, because he's not too far away from us here, Phil, because Stephen Roche, who won the Tour de France in 1987, is working on the Tour de France as part of the publicity caravan, and he must be egging his son on here to just close that gap down. You know, he's so close to winning a stage, and I think inspired by the performance yesterday of his teammate, Michael Rogers, he's just got to bury himself on a climb like this. Visconti has been, I think, 2 times champion of Italy. He's riding on this team of Movistar. He came here today into the breakaway to think about Alejandro Valverde. But let's not forget, Phil, this is a Spanish team. He might be Italian, but the Spaniards will be shouting on this team up the slopes.
The year of the Italians. This is a group here. Peter Velits off to the left. Jürgen van den Broek setting the pace. Alejandro Valverde. TJ Van Garderen is in here. What a switch around from 24 hours ago. This man has a chance now to reclaim a little bit of lost time.
Yes, but they don't have the firepower in this group. They're all looking at each other's thing to each other. I wonder who's going to do the pacemaking next, as we now start to see a little bit further up from the yellow jersey group, Romain Bardet. He is now 1 minute and 43 seconds. He's actually fading a bit, Phil, because the yellow jersey group now, I've got only 15 seconds behind him.
Yeah, the work of Janson here for his teammate in white is it makes him, as you say, about 15 seconds behind him on this climb. He could be coming back as we look at this young face of the future of the Tour de France for sure.
Yes, but it's good to see the man in the second position there in that white jersey, Phil. He's only 24 years of age. He's got a number of years to improve, to get stronger for the climbs. And as we've seen this year, he's really improved his downhill skills.
And just looking at the back of the Nibali group here, here's Vincenzo Nibali, but TJ Van Gordon, that red and black jersey there, I'd love to see his face because he looks to me as though he's on a good day after a terrible day. Now, this is Maika here, and of course Rodriguez isn't going to allow him any freedom. Remember, there's 50 points if you win the stage for the mountains, and so Rodriguez is going to follow. Maka says, well, come through and give me a hand. He says, no thanks, and neither does Jon Izagirre.
Well, the reason is Jon Izagirre has got a teammate up the front. He's not going to participate. And for Joaquim Rodriguez, he's tactically riding. He knows all he has to do, Phil, is to finish in front of Maika at the top of this climb.
This has been an absolutely superb Tour de France. Everybody believing in themselves, giving it their best shot all of the time. This is Giovanni Visconti here, from the bed of a South Australian hospital to leading the race on the Plat d'Aix. Incredible. This is Frank Schleck, another man who I think the renaissance has taken place for him. Champion of Luxembourg, and now applying the tourniquet.
Well, Frank Schleck has ridden better and better as this Tour de France has gone on. Looks over his shoulder, he can feel the Spanish weight there behind him. Jon Izagirre, champion of Spain, will not do anything at all to help the success of Frank Schleck. But always there is Maika. He knows that today is a big chance for him. But the gaps are coming back. The yellow jersey group is at 2 minutes and 6 seconds. They are just 16 seconds behind this man. Here is the man they're chasing this afternoon, Romain Bardet, at 23 years of age. One of the new darlings of France. There only ever used to be Thomas Voeckler, and now there's half a dozen of them.
Rafael Maika is deciding to stretch his lead if he can, remember. Or if he does that, he'll be fine. And look at that from Rodriguez. That's not on. It'd be very silly to do that in front of the commissaires.
In front of the television cameras too.
Yeah.
He grabbed the back end of that aerial. Now have a look at this. He saw it. Bit of a naughty move. That's not as if he was trying to push the motorbike out of the way. And Rodriguez, as you can see, protesting there. I wonder if anything will come of that a little bit later on.
Youthful enthusiasm. Well, normally they get a 20-second penalty for doing that first offence. As Maika is now looking at an attack here on the climb, and no reaction from Rodriguez. This is the leader, Giovanni Visconti, the 31-year-old. 2 stages won in the Giro d'Italia last year, and not a lot this year because of his accident at the start of the season in Australia.
Yes, but last year, Phil, let's not forget, he won 2 stages of the Giro d'Italia, and he certainly is a great performer. And when you win the Italian National Championships on 2 occasions, you know how to get yourself into a situation like this.
2 minutes 3 seconds. As we go up the climb here, 2 minutes 3 seconds, 7 kilometers we're looking for now. This is Bardet, remember, who's now looking over his shoulder consistently because this group, being led by Janson, is coming back to him.
Yeah, and I wonder if Thibaut Pinot is going to make a move. In fact, yes, there is the answer almost immediately. He'd used his teammate to... Wow, and now goes the move there. Rafael Maika finished 6th overall in the Giro d'Italia. He used his teammate Nicolas Roche. Now all of a sudden his move, Jean-Christophe Perrault has gone, and the response is coming from Vincenzo Nibali. Valverde has been dropped from this group. He's slipping away. There is TJ Van Garderen trying to respond. Coming back up there, there is Mikel Nieve, number 5, looks across at Alejandro Valverde. Now this is the move.
Well, we weren't quite expecting a sudden resurgence like that, Paul, but it came from AG2R. But Nibali doesn't miss a move.
Well, I tell you, the move initially came from Thibaut Pinot, who made that acceleration, and as soon as they saw that, Nibali responded. Now Jean-Christophe Perrault has come across as well, but the man in difficulty is Alejandro Valverde. They're looking over their shoulders. The man who is in 2nd place overall at the start of the day, that's the man they wanted to put the pressure on.
Yes, and more seconds in the bank. Nibali hasn't gone unnoticed with Nibali. Remember, he started the day, this man in 2nd place, 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Now, 29 seconds lost by Valverde would put the white jersey of Thibaut Pinot into 2nd place in the Tour. Boy, the French are seeing absolutely just about everything in front of them right now.
And also right up there as well, Perrault is looking to climb that little bit higher himself, and he will collaborate because it moves all of the Frenchmen higher up in the overall standings.
Well, Perrault needs 1 minute 31 on Valverde to get take him out the place as well. So as we look at the climbs here, Nibali, Bardet on the left at the moment. The yellow jersey stays the same. Valverde loses a bit of time, it will stay 2nd. Pinot could stay third, Perrault could be up to fourth, Bardet in fifth. It's all a matter of time, and on this occasion, once you go second, third and fourth, you are talking no more than 90 seconds difference.
Amazing how things can turn around. The man who started the move there, Thibaut Pinot, he's actually gone to the back of this group. TJ Van Garderen in the red and black jersey there seems to be recovering after his bad day yesterday. He's kept his body fully fueled on a day like this, but talk about having a hard day in the saddle. And Alejandro Valverde, Race Radio is saying that all of a sudden Rafael Majka is making the comeback of his life.
Inspiration, knowing the top is coming, knowing that on this climb the King of the Mountains contenders get double points over the finish. Valverde, though, is going to cause the others to go as best as they can. He's in the distance there. He's only a matter of seconds behind this group. And TJ Van Garderen in the red, who hangs on. Everybody in front of him, though, is in front of him in the classification, except Valverde, who might be a little bit too far. 5 minutes in front of him.
Right, well, Valverde now in difficulty, so Vincenzo Nibali decides that inside of 5 kilometers to go, Jean-Christophe Perrault says, right, I'm off, my mate.
How does Perrault do it? Not far off. I think he's 5th or 6th oldest man in the race, Jean-Christophe Perrault. And again, the diesel engine kicks in of TJ Van Garderen. Now comes an incredible move. This is a huge acceleration. 1 minute 48 and nearly 5 kilometers left to climb. Vincenzo Nibali could lift the pace and win the stage.
Well, 37 years of age, Jean-Christophe Perrault, and he has responded there very quickly. They've rapidly caught here Jürgen van den Broek. I'm sure he'll be dispatched quite remarkably, as we now see a little bit further down. You've got there, this is Thibaut Pinot, TJ Van Garderen. Just behind him there, wearing number 82, is Romain Bardet. They have all faltered after the attack of Vincenzo Nibali.
Well, he waited, but now his jaw is set. This isn't a matter of gaining time. This is a matter of pride now to see if he can win his 4th stage as we go through the town of Soulin.
That's Joaquim Rodriguez. He's been caught on the left-hand side and dropped.
This is Thibaut Pinot. Well, at least he's won 1 battle today. He's put that man back in his place and he keeps his white jersey. But they could all be slipping down at the same time. Pinot, working like this, could get 2nd place tonight if he can leave number 11 behind.
Well, that's what they're trying to do, but at the front of the race there's a bit of drama going on as well, because Race Radio is saying between, well, there it is, there is the man who leads the race of Visconti. Race Radio just said 16 seconds. Phil, that is not 16 seconds. These 2 riders are pretty much together.
Giovanni Visconti looks over his shoulder, will be a little bit surprised to see the polka dot jersey of Rafael Majka coming up to him, as he continues now to make good inroads here. It is becoming a totally committed battle by the superstars of this year's Tour de France. 4.2 kilometers. The sped to the yellow is 1 minute 36. Nibali is still coming.
Of the Pyrenees is going to shuffle the top 10 in the overall standings one more time, but this is the moment when you don't need a team anymore. If you're a leader of the Tour de France, if you're the top man, you have to assume control. But this group, we're looking at the Tour de France for the next 4 or 5 years. On the front, that is Thibaut Pinot, 24 years of age. Behind him, Bardet at 23 years of age. And on the back, TJ Van Garderen, 25 years of age. They're the future we'll talk about for the next 4 or 5 years.
And Pinot really is racing for 2nd place in the Tour de France now. He needs to finish 29 seconds in front of Alejandro Valverde. Valverde fighting to keep his 2nd place in the Tour de France right now.
Well, I make Valverde, according to Race Radio, recovering quite a bit, because he's only 11 seconds behind the Pinot group. So Alejandro Valverde using every bit of the experience, Phil, that he can muster to try and climb himself back into that 2nd place overall tonight. But what a battle it's going to be over these last few kilometers.
They've thrown just about everything they can at each other. Remember the peloton just 2 mountains ago, completely spread across the Pyrenees. TJ Van Garderen has got 1 yard come back to set the pace at the front, so he's taken up the running for the white jersey. Through the crowd, now the chase group led by Jean Izagirre here, champion of Spain. 2 kilometers, they've all dropped back to try and help number 11.
Now you know why Jonas Zagir, wearing number 16, was in that early morning breakaway, so that when it came to the showdown on this final climb of the day, he could turn the books around and work for his teammate. Looking now, very shortly, this man who started the day in the King of the Mountains jersey, Rafael Majka, look at that. It winks again at the camera, fellas. He's looking around the corner to see the Flamme Rouge, the red kite.
A wink of the man who's about to consolidate his lead in the King of the Mountains now, and we thought that impossible. Lost it on the road today. Under the kite, 1 kilometre to go as they climb the Plat d'Adet for the 10th time since 1974, and that won't be the first time that we've had a Polish winner up here, because this is where the only other cyclist from Poland ever won, back in 1993, I think it was, Zenon Jaskula. As he now remember that he's already ridden well to get the King of the Mountains jersey. This is going to be very special. Now, can they bring him back at this stage of the race? He won into Rissoul, which was stage 14 of the Tour de France.
Well, there's 27 seconds now, Phil, the advantage of Majka over Visconti, so it's pretty much in the bag. But what the question is going to be is what will the overall standings look like, because Alejandro Valverde is almost back as Vincenzo Nibali goes under the Flamme Rouge with Alessandro Di Marchi and Jean-Christophe Perrault.
He's thrown his little communication system away now. He doesn't want anybody to tell him how hard to try. He knows the answer to that right now. Little check over his shoulder. Looks as though he can see Pierre Roland Foy, who's in front of the yellow jersey group. Well, this has been an incredible, and the smiles are beginning now because the banner is just ahead. 2 Polish cyclists have won the stages of the Tour de France, and they both won right here on the Plat d'Adet. And this, for him, is his 2nd win of the Tour de France this year, and no Polish cyclist has ever done that.
And the 2nd win in 2 days in the Pyrenees for Tinkoff Saxo.
2nd in the row. So without Alberto Contador, the man they thought might win the Tour for them, they've come out and they're about to take 3 stages so far. What a battle it has been, and TJ Van Garderen was launching an attack from that group as we came back up to the front of the race. 500 meters to go. It is very, very steep as he crosses the line. And listen to the speaker here, Daniel Manjas, calling him home.
Yeah, Daniel Manjas, Phil, who's celebrating his 41st Tour de France this year and his last one, and what a race to call.
And he's just mentioned the name of Zenon Jaskula, the only other Polish cyclist to win a stage of the Tour here. And now it's being repeated by Rafael Majka in the polka dot jersey, which is his. And he's now saying, come on, cheer me home. Punches the sky. He gets his 2nd stage win as the battle continues, and what a great ride by the man who broke his leg in January in South Australia. Giovanni Visconti comes home in 2nd place. He can only think, Paul, what might have been.
Yes, but he tried, he gave his all. He was in that breakaway to look after the interests of Alejandro Valverde, but it's still, he will know that he's been in an incredible battle here this afternoon. Well, the question is, when in fact it's Nibali coming up, that they've caught and passed Pierre Roland.
Well, this is incredible. Well, we no doubt in our minds who the winner of the Tour de France is. He won't say that until he gets to Paris, but there he is, across the line, just 43 seconds after the winner. Vincenzo Nibali and Jean-Christophe Perrault right behind him, as well as the Frenchman continues to battle out the next man on the podium.
Well, a great comeback by Frank Schleck here in the last week of the Tour de France, coming up there with Bauke Mollema in the wheel. And Frank Schleck, who started the day in 14th place, well, he's going to ride a little bit higher in the overall standings, and I think he'll be quite pleased with his ride on day 2. And Nicolas Roche, you know, this guy, I think, will be the first man to go and congratulate the winner, because it was his work in the early slopes of this climb. Look at that. He's happy with that.
They'll be running out of champagne in the Tinkoff Saxo camp because they drank a lot last night with Michael Rogers. They can do it all again tonight with Majka. Valverde comes over the line.
Yes, but look at this, Phil. He's gained a little bit of time over the riders who were challenging him.
What a
Talk
return.
about using the tactics. He comes across the line ahead of Pinot, ahead of Bardet, and ahead of Van Garderen.
From losing time, he reversed the situation in the last kilometre. Amazing. Actually gained time over Pinot. Lost a little bit of time to Jean-Christophe Perrault, but it won't be enough to make any difference, at least tonight. Remember, tomorrow we finish on top of another giant, Hautecam, just above Lourdes.
He was in the breakaway for a long time, and then we never saw him again.
Well, he dropped back, and I didn't think he was going back to wait. He looked to me as though he was actually going back because he was too tired.
One man who wasn't too tired, though, this young man. You've got to remember that he's a guy who's got quite a serious pedigree, because he finished 6th overall in the Giro d'Italia. He's a great climber, and today he proved that he can survive over a short stage, a pretty violent stage when it came to the pace of the race. Over 54 kilometers an hour over the first 45 minutes of racing. And at the end of the day, it was still run off pretty quickly. I suppose when you bear in mind that Oleg Tinkoff, the owner of the race, is on the race, and instead of champagne tonight, they may well be having caviar, because Oleg Tinkoff made his original fortune in Russia from caviar.
Yes, he's one of the richest men in the world. Has a personal fortune over $1.3 billion. Now,
Dollars, euros, it doesn't really matter when you get to
really.
that amount.
Could have bought a boat, but instead he decided to buy himself a cycling team. He thought it was more fun.
Well, he rides a lot of the stages dressed up in the same kit as his teammates, or his team, I should say.
Overall, Nibali keeps his lead. He's worn the jersey for 15 days out of a possible 17. Valverde, 5:26, loses a little bit more ground, but stays ahead of Pinot, who is 34 seconds ahead of him. Valverde, and then comes Jean-Christophe Perrault, Romain Bardet, the same 3 Frenchmen challenge and battle personally as well. TJ Van Garderen stays in 6th place today. Bauke Mollema comes up to 7th, gets the better of his teammate. Lawrence ten Damme goes down to 8th. Leopold Koenig keeps his 9th place, although he cracked a little bit today. And Pierre Rolland conserves a place in the top 10 with one more day in the mountains.